right, so good evening. I would like to call to order the February 6, 2023 Lake Washington School Board meeting. Please let the record reflect that 4 of our board members are present this evening. 1 is excused, Director Carlson, as well as our student rep, Evan Kurtz, is here this evening, and Shivani had other projects she had to take care of this evening. So the board does value public participation, so welcome to all of you here this evening and engagement in our meetings of the board. Our meetings are live streamed on the Lake Washington School District website. If you're having any difficulties in going through board docs, our study sessions are also live streamed, but please go through our website in which to get to the live streaming. They are archived later if you are interested in seeing them later. So first this evening, we'd like to start with a land acknowledgement, and I believe Director LaLiberty will do so.
Yes, this is the land acknowledgement and commitment to Native students and families from the Lake Washington School District Board of Directors. The Board of Directors of Lake Washington School District acknowledges that our district is on the indigenous land of the Coast Salish people who have reserved treaty rights on this land, including the Duwamish and the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived here since time immemorial. We commit to continue collaborating with our Native community to teach the indigenous history of this land and these local tribes to all children of the district. We also commit to provide the best possible education for all children of Native descent who attend our schools.
Thank you. So the next item, I will now entertain a motion to approve the February 6, 2023 agenda.
So moved. Tie.
Been moved by Director Stewart, seconded by Director LaLiberty to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. So our first item on the agenda this evening is public comment. As stated prior, we do welcome the public to the business meetings of the board, and we encourage community engagement. We do dedicate 30 minutes to hear from the public during a public comment period. As those of you who have signed up, you can sign up to participate on the district website, and the sign up does close at noon on the day of the board meeting, and comments will be offered in the order of sign up, beginning with speakers in person, followed by virtual, and concluding with written comments as time allows. With this, please note the board does not take comments regarding staff and personnel matters in a public forum, but you are always welcome to email board members directly at boardmembers@lwsd.org. Please know that public comment is only one way in which to have conversation and communication with the board. We do email as well as have meetings if necessary as well. But with that, we'd like to call the... he's reminding me, we do request that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. We do have a light over there. It goes green to yellow to red. If it goes red at that point, if you could wrap up your comments at that point, it would be beneficial so we can make sure we get to everybody in that time frame. And so with that, our first person that we have this evening is Teresa Lynn. And also, if I could ask if you could state your name and affiliation you have if you'd like, and then if you do have anything written, you're welcome to leave that with us as well.
Thank you so much. Good evening. My name is Teresa Lynn, and I am the mother of 2 students at Helen Keller Elementary. I am here tonight to ask the district to support a cohesive K-12 choral program in the Juanita High School learning community through increased communication and information sharing. My older daughter will attend Kamiakin Middle School next year and recently completed her registration process, including selecting an elective. Currently, Kamiakin does not offer choir as an elective due to low student interest. And after making some inquiries, I discovered that choir has been only an occasional elective at Kamiakin for about a decade. This was puzzling to me because choir has the lowest barrier to entry of all music electives, requiring no instrument purchase or rental and no prior experience to fully participate. Not to mention, elementary music specialists are essentially choir teachers. Most early music literacy is singing-based. Elementary students singing at school assemblies are participating in choir. How could it be that students are signing up for band and orchestra at Kamiakin, but in an entire middle school, there aren't even 25 students to form a single choir class? Members of the board, there is a serious lack of information sharing and communication about choir. When looking for music program information on the Lake Washington School District website, it is easy to find a dedicated page for elementary band and orchestra, featuring links to fact sheets, video overviews, and program information for 4th and 5th graders. There is no mention of choir, or how elementary music is essentially an introduction to choir to middle school. After using a keyword search to see what information I could find about choir, there is a single video link to a middle school choir overview tucked away at the very bottom of the band and orchestra page. How can parents learn more about choir when it is all but absent from the district's website? We parents use our own knowledge, advice from other parents, and information from schools and the school district to make informed choices about our child's education. I am a classical singer and voice teacher and already know the physical, emotional, and social benefits of singing in choir. But how would a non-musical parent know about registering their child for middle school choir based on current district information and so many years of no choir? It is my belief that the demand for choir will present itself when families know what choir is. But without sharing information, Kamiakin's choir program will continue to struggle. That is a huge loss, not only for Kamiakin, but for the entire Juanita High School learning community. It is time for a cohesive K-12 choral program. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So our next individual we have signed up is Trey Flynn. Okay, so I will try one more. Trey Flynn, are you in our audience? Okay, if not, then I will go on to the next person. If they show up, we will then have them come a little later. So my next person I have on the list is Jayota Bawa. I apologize if I did not pronounce your name correctly.
Members of the board of Lake Washington School District, my name is Jyoti Bawa. I've been teaching science in Lake Washington School District for the past 17 years, as well as playing many roles that help build community. I live in the Lake Washington School District community. Both my children are graduates of this school district. Since I have joined this district, I have given my heart and soul for the good of my students, my colleagues, and the community. Teaching is not just a job for me, it is my passion. I'm here to ask for set guidelines and policy around investigation of staff when they face an allegation. I was a staff member who was part of a 4-month-long investigation. At the end of the investigation, it was found that I had not violated any district expectation and policies. The amount of time the investigation took and the manner in which the complaint was handled was deeply humiliating for me. It put a tremendous amount of stress and caused me unhealthy levels of anxiety, which led to frequent stomach aches. After multiple trips to the emergency room, numerous visits to the doctors for various tests and biopsies, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, which is a chronic condition that surfaced because of the stress which my work situation created. Since the onset of this disease, I have lost tremendous amount of weight, and it has impacted my ability to teach and partake in simple activities such as going out for groceries. Heavy dose of steroids helps me carry on my job, although there are days when I must rush to the bathroom and hope that I make it there on time. I'm also fielding various rumors on a weekly basis, in addition to paying never-ending medical bills and cost of drugs, which now exceed $8,000 in out-of-pocket costs. Although the investigation is officially closed, for me, it is far from over. Every time I see a doctor, every time I rush to the bathroom, every time I wake up at night in pain, every time I defend a rumor, I relive the humiliation. It is important for me to let you know my story because when decisions are made, they affect more than just one person. I'm available at a later time to give you in-depth details around my full experience and how it has changed me as an educator and how it has impacted my school's community. There is a need to initiate a change so that no other teacher has to go through what I'm going through. There is a need to set policies and procedures for investigations for staff. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So the next individual I do have signed up to speak tonight is Sumita Reddy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sumita Reddy. My daughter goes to Renaissance School of Art and Reasoning, and she's in 8th grade this year. I'm here. I'm not prepared or anything, but I'm here because I am very upset with the school district's way of handling things at school when there was a scenario last year when my daughter was in 7th grade. So parents were not informed properly. Kids were not informed properly. The way the school district handled the scenario, the teachers were let go. This impacted the students very much because I feel that the most important reason parents pick a choice school is because of the school is very small and it's like a community, and the teachers get to know the students for those 3 years. And at the end of the school year, like in May, when suddenly this decision was made, it impacted a lot of kids. And we lost almost 20 kids because it impacted the other teachers too. So I feel the school district's way of handling communication and allegations against teachers with no respect, there could have been a different way of dealing these things. I feel if the school board doesn't know how to respect the teacher, how are you guys going to teach other people or the students to respect a teacher? I feel you guys need to learn that. I feel that's the most important thing, that respecting teachers, because if that concept is not instilled in our students' mind, then I don't know where we are seeing our future generations. We need to bring people who are involved in these kind of scenarios in a common table to talk the scenario out. I heard and I felt that the teacher was not given the fair opportunity to talk about this scenario. So I am going to ask the board to work out your policies in a way where teachers are given an opportunity to talk, and also the parents are given an opportunity to come in and present themselves. There were so many witnesses in the classrooms. Nothing was done. I don't even know in the 4 months what was done by the school board. So I feel that this was an unfair, and it's not fair to not only the teacher, it's not fair to the students who were involved, the parents that were involved in this one. So I'm asking the school board to reevaluate these kind of scenarios in future in a proper and more respectable way to the teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next individual I have signed up is Anna Perna. Ready?
Hi, my name is Anna Perna Reddy. I'm currently an 8th grader at RSAR. I'm speaking because of the situation with Ms. Bawa that happened last year. How can we as a school district be proud of what we have done when this teacher has gone through so many issues and so many health conditions because of what you've done? We can't have decisions made instantly because this teacher has faced through so much after this, and it has changed her as a person and educator, and we're just leaving it like that. We cannot leave it like this when everything's gonna be, and say that everything's gonna be okay, because we know it's not. The teachers, the students, the parents have all gone through something, and it's changed all of us as a person. For me, I've been through so much these past 2 years, not knowing what was gonna come next. We had 3 teachers leave because of this one incident. How do I know what's gonna come next when our school district can't figure this out either? Thank you.
Thank you. And the next person I have signed up is Marlene Vachniks.
Good evening. My name is Marlene Vachniks, and I'm the office manager at Redmond Middle School. We were informed that Lake Washington School District will not be bringing middle school deans back next year. I am asking Lake Washington School District to rethink this decision and to try to find a way to keep middle school deans where the timing of student support is crucial in young person's life. The school year having a dean at Redmond Middle School has been amazing. It is an important role in our busy school for students that need redirecting, extra support, or to feel they matter. Julie Hornan is our dean, and she has put so much time and effort into making connections with many, especially in-need students and families that might have otherwise fallen through the cracks. One frequent student in our office told me he hated school, and the only reason he came to school was because of Miss H. Redmond Middle School is the second largest middle school in the district. Our school is extremely busy. Our administrators, along with counselors, are working with students all day long, making plans and accommodations so students stay in school and feel successful. We have many students that need extra support, as we have almost 1,000 students. Julie has attended many IEP, 504, behavioral, staff, and parent meetings, so she knows the details of issues and concerns, and then can directly assist the students. Julie has a passion for this job and helping to make students feel good about themselves so they can work on feeling that they are seen and heard. Letting Julie in this position go would be devastating to many students that know she is there for them each day to be able to reach out to her for support. For many students, when they are in crisis, Julie is the first point of contact because they trust her, and students know she will support and help them through issues and barriers to get them through the day. We have many students that need extra support, and Julie is always running around to make sure students are doing what they should be doing. Julie goes above and beyond to make sure students are held accountable for their actions and when working with behavioral or challenging students. When you have a designated person looking out for the whole school population, specifically to support students, it's an important piece in helping students be successful and responsible students. I am asking you to please revisit this decision of removing deans from middle schools in our district. Students in middle schools need this extra support and services that directly serve students. If we can catch students in middle school with the needed support, I feel students will move into high school more prepared and set to graduate on time because someone took the time to help them sooner rather than later. Please reconsider keeping the valuable dean position that supports our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I believe that ends our in-person comments for this evening, and now we will move to online. And I believe Lisa Guthrie, you are online. So please start speaking when you are ready. We're still working at getting you up. Can she hear us? So Lisa, you are currently muted at this point in time, and we do not see you.
Can you hear me all right?
We can, thank you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Can you tell her we can hear her? Somehow the audio is not going on in Teams.
You can't hear us. Can you hear us now?
Okay, great.
Okay.
Members of the board, tonight you're going to review the monitoring report for Results Policy R2, Academic Content Knowledge and Skills. The district's assessment is that it has made, quote, reasonable progress with noted exceptions. One of those noted exceptions is that barely 50% of LWSD second graders receiving special education services are meeting the end-of-year benchmark on the FastBridge Literacy Assessment, down nearly 4 percentage points from last year and against a goal of 90%. I'd like to add a little color to this number as the parent of a current second grader who is receiving special education services and who is unlikely to meet that end-of-year benchmark. My kid entered LWSD 3 months after she underwent brain surgery that disconnected the left hemisphere of her brain. Real quick neuroscience lesson, the left hemisphere is the language hemisphere, both spoken and written. Right now, all of your left hemispheres are busy processing the words that I'm speaking, as my left hemisphere is busy processing the words that I'm reading here. Yet despite her medical history, a stack of documentation from her team at Seattle Children's Hospital predicting reading difficulties, and my own expressed concerns around her reading, my child was not identified for any type of reading intervention for almost 2 years. She didn't score quite badly enough on FastBridge to meet the threshold for safety net services. She had an IEP, but it didn't include reading services, nor did I know that I could ask to have them added. Once I figured it out, she got a phenomenal reading teacher added to her IEP team, and she's been making progress in reading since, but she lost 2 years. And this is a kid who cannot afford to lose any time when it comes to reading. I cannot stress enough how difficult it is to watch your child struggle with reading, because reading is the foundation for everything that happens in school. Just flip through even a first grade math workbook and notice how much reading is expected. If you don't teach these kids how to read and read well, you're going to have a much harder time teaching them anything else. Members of the board, we elected you to hold the district accountable for its academic results. So hold them accountable, especially for early literacy. Ask why we're continuing to use a Tier 1 literacy curriculum that is, and I quote, likely to leave many children, particularly those at risk for reading acquisition, behind in reading development, according to an extensive review by Student Achievement Partners. Ask how kids are identified for MTSS Tiers 2 and 3. Ask about the interaction between safety net and special services. Ask what reading intervention looks like in 3rd grade and beyond, because these kids who aren't learning to read well by the end of 2nd grade aren't going to magically learn during the summer before 3rd grade. Ask whether teachers feel confident in the professional development they've gotten around foundational literacy. Most teachers do not learn how to teach reading in college. PD is vital. Ask the hard questions and keep asking them, not just once a year when the R2 monitoring report is on the table. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that actually ends our spoken part of public comment this evening. We did receive some written comments, one from Veronica Nelson in regards to the situation at Renaissance, as well as 3 others, Rachel Malloy and Devin Kellogg. She sent in 2 in regards to sustainability and the study session and some feedback back on that was done on Saturday. So those are available on it and have been available to all the board members going forward. So with that, we will end public comment for this evening, and so thank you.
I have a quick question. Can everybody who came to support the change in policy for Ms. Bawa stand up?
Tough question. I just have a question. Can? I guess the phrasing is an answer.
So thank you, and thank you for attendance. As is our customary practice, public comment is a time when we hear from the audience. It is not a time that we then engage in conversation around so. So we will be continuing with our agenda for the meeting going forward. Please feel free. You are welcome to stay. If you would like to get up and leave at this point, you are also welcome to do that. I just wanted to make sure that you were aware. So the email, if just in case you are interested in email, is boardmembers@lwsd.org. Thank you. All right, so our next item on the agenda this evening is the approval of the February 6th, 2023 consent agenda. I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Director LaLiberty and seconded by Director Choi and Dr. Holman. Will you poll the board?
Director LaLiberty,
Yes.
Director Stewart,
Yes.
Vice President Choi,
Yes.
and President Bleasner.
Yes. And Dr. Holman, could you please summarize the donations?
Absolutely. So tonight on the board's packet, you have over $30,000 worth of donations, some coming from our PTSA and some coming from other sources. So appreciate our PTSA and our local community and partners providing donations to our schools and district.
Thank you. So we'll begin with our non-consent agenda this evening. And so our first item on is the district textbook adoption of 8th grade social studies, high school U.S. history, and high school civics social studies. So Dr. Holman, if you'd like to take that.
Well, tonight we have a whole team here to present to the board these three unique social studies adoptions. As you will recall, and as Dr. Rose will remind the board, we did a portion of the secondary social studies adoption last school year. Due to COVID and due to some piloting timelines, we did need to extend that into this year. And so tonight you're receiving the formal presentation on the final selection of curricula. And with that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Rose.
Okay, thank you so much. We are really excited to be here tonight. As Dr. Holman said, this has been a long journey for a really terrific team, and so we're excited to be coming to, it's not the end of our journey, it's actually, we often talk about in adoptions, this is the part that the hard work really starts, but this is an exciting part. But we have a great team with us tonight, including one of our students who's going to join me here for the land acknowledgement.
We honor the land we walk upon here today, for we have been granted the privilege to be here. From the water beneath the dirt that flows into the roots of our trees and the songs that the birds sing in the sky. We thank the original caretakers of this land, the Suquamish Indian tribe, Duwamish tribe, and the Coast Salish people tribe. Here, past and present since time immemorial.
Thank you, Anastasia. Thank you. So our team tonight, have Anastasia from Eastlake, correct? All right, and then we have Crystal Stevens, and we have Dr. Larry Harvey, who's helping with this year, and we have Maria Files, who's from Inglewood, and Siobhan Flanagan from Redmond High, Stephanie Monahan from Emerson, and then Anastasia, of course, from Eastlake. So we've had a great team, and this is, as you can see from this list of who started on our team and who's been engaged, we have had a significant group of people involved in this adoption. We had, I think, 7 community members, or 11 to begin with? We began with 10, and had community members strongly engaged throughout the process, and had teachers from all of our comprehensive high schools, as well as multiple of our choice schools engaged in it. And we have had many students engaged in the process as well. So tonight, because this is our second time going through the process, we wanted just to give a brief overview of the adoption process and really share with you the recommended resources, and then really importantly, the teacher and student experience in social studies, and some of the steps that we're taking through this adoption to ensure diverse perspectives in social studies, and then what that means next for a deep implementation so that the learning continues and deepens for our students. So as we go through any adoption, and this really came through with social studies, we really thought about how we address and ensure equitable outcomes through our curriculum, through our instructional resources. So we spent some time at the beginning of our adoption process looking at student outcomes and thinking about how our instructional resources impact student outcomes. We engaged specifically in equity training as a team to deepen and calibrate our thinking. One thing that was important to us, and it's important in every content area, but really especially in social studies, is that the materials are dynamic over time. That as the world changes, our resources change so that we're able to be relevant and responsive to our students. That was something that was important to us all along the way. We also really wanted to include student voice, that when we're thinking about social studies, when we're thinking about civics and government and community, that having students have a strong voice in the adoption, and then as we go forward in implementation, was really important to the team. We also were able to collaborate with our special education department, intervention services, accelerated programs, and equity, both in terms of making decisions about resources and in bringing learning to the team about what each group felt was really important for us as a team to consider as we move forward with considering resources. We consulted with the Snoqualmie Tribe, we consulted and worked with the Anti-Defamation League, and we also worked with our regional education leaders from Puget Sound ESD and district equity leaders. Really, we wanted this to be a larger community process with many different thought leaders coming together to have this be a really good choice for now, and then think about how, as we go forward into the future, how we continue to partner with all these different groups to ensure we're timely and relevant in our learning. So just a quick overview of our process. In our adoption process, we'll spend our first year doing a deep dive into standards and into relevant, important issues, including equity, including all the things that we've mentioned before. And then we'll align our work with thinking about rubrics in a way that we can evaluate resources in a way that's consistent, keeps us aligned with standards and thinking about effective practice, as well as thinking about the digital resources and how the curriculum is organized and designed so that teachers can really deliver it well. And then in our year 2 of our adoption process, we evaluate the curriculum and we go into piloting and we look at vertical alignment. That was something that we've done differently in the past few years for adoptions, was that instead of having a middle school adoption separate from a high school adoption, we felt it was really important to have that aligned 6 through 12 alignment built into the process so that we could be thinking about all of the different learning in terms of the alignment of skills and knowledge in a way that made sense over time, so not separate and discrete. And then typically in a year 3 outcome, we plan for implementation. We have new materials going into classrooms and we continue to gather stakeholder feedback. So that's our typical process. For social studies, because of the timing, we were impacted absolutely by COVID. That last year, our large team and our teachers did an incredible job of working to pilot in really challenging conditions. And there are a few things that made us pause on some of the courses. And one of them was just making sure that we could actually have enough stakeholders in U.S. history and in civics. We could have enough stakeholders, enough voices, enough student voice to pilot in a way that we felt that we had enough voice to make a good decision. For one of the other courses, for 8th grade, it's brand new curriculum. And we wanted to make sure before we made a final choice that the final product aligned with what we wanted, with the high standards we have for our curriculum. So for grades 6, 9, and 10, we were able to determine recommendations. But for these courses you'll hear about tonight, we took more time to make sure that we could make a very thoughtful decision. So for 6th, 7th, and 9th and 10th grade, we made decisions in 21-22. This fall, we piloted 8th grade and re-examined the curriculum, and then we have recommendations tonight. And then we also piloted U.S. history and civics this past fall and have some recommendations about those as well. Throughout the process, we had students as part of the adoption committee. We were in classrooms before and during the pilot. We gathered student survey feedback about their learning experiences before they actually piloted and then while they were in the middle of it so that we could actually understand what students were looking for and then what their experience actually was. Students were able to give feedback at the end of each pilot. We had teachers from all secondary schools on the adoption committee. We engaged with departments. We had teachers giving input during the pilot process. We had many teachers in addition to those on the committee as part of the pilot, and that was very intentional, that we wanted people that were new to the process and new to the materials to be able to evaluate them both with deep learning and without deep learning. We engaged the community through 2 different information nights, one last spring and then one just this past fall. We had curriculum reviews and surveys online. We utilized Parent Square and Connections. We sent home a parent pilot letter to every family that was in the pilot. And then we had physical copies here at the Resource Center. So we have some recommendations for you tonight, but I think I want the team to come up in just a moment, but our focus was really thinking about how do we have robust, equitable, and accessible resources for social studies. And so with that, I'm going to ask Maria Files from Inglewood to come on up and start the presentation. For 8th grade.
Evening. I'm used to like touching the actual screen for 8th grade. Okay, thank you. So here is kind of a brief look at our different really, I guess, units you could call them, and then each unit has different modules. Here's what we're hoping will be approved by the board. It's called EduCurious. What we really liked and noticed when we piloted this was, especially with my students last spring, was all of them felt they saw either a part of themselves in it or could connect their own identities of themselves or the community to what we were doing. And that is not easy to do with the social studies for 8th graders. So the rest of them there, yes, there's lots of ways to show their thinking. There's many different resources in there built in that they're already familiar with and know how to use, as well as helping them work through those levels of thinking that we want. Maybe first identifying things to then really evaluating and judging and even some application or transfer of their learning. And then, because of some of the challenges, just to briefly talk about them for 8th grade, is we have our Since Time Immemorial curriculum that we were very intentionally wanted to connect to our Washington State history and curriculum in 8th grade. And this is one of the very few curriculums that we looked at that does that connects those Native Indigenous peoples' perspectives from our own state, from our own communities to the curriculum. I'll try not to rah-rah too much. And then this is an example of back in one of our units. We piloted in my classroom our rights, our responsibilities, our issues. This is an example of one of the modules, lesson 1 and 2. You can kind of peruse over that. But what I really liked as a teacher and for those students, they knew exactly what they were learning about. They knew exactly where and how to do that. And then I, as the teacher, knew the end result, so I could see those steps broken down for them. And the students could too. So there was no, well, why are we doing this? Or what's the point? As you might have had when you were an 8th grader. And then on top of that, there's really clear support for leveling students, whether they need more support for language, or maybe organization, or maybe they just want some more. They want to know how to get involved more at their kind of own community. One of the great things about EduCurious is there's always that Explore More section. Every single module lesson piece has that there. So found that really helpful. And then when it came to demonstrating their learning, you might be very used to your worksheet or your test to demonstrate your learning, but EduCurious does not depend fully on that summative or formative assessments. So it really connects to kind of students' own awareness of how to show what they know, as well as building still within those steps of that taxonomy of thinking. And then another piece that I love as an 8th grade middle school teacher is they're actually giving their own feedback to their peers, and it's not just coming from me. So I think that is also super powerful for them and helps with that the biggest skill in social studies of that critical conversations and how to have those. And then, again, I touched on this a little bit more. This is just at a glance, so you can really see how robust and, for lack of better words, equitable perspectives all of our units are. So this is an overview of it, and you can see not only within like one part of the unit, but all 3 modules, multiple lessons, students really feel empowered, and they're gaining not only their own identities, but learning those other perspectives from their communities. And this is kind of that last piece. I just wanted to brag a little bit, because I can with my students. They will not be named, because she might be a little shy, but one of their kind of culminating piece was if they had their own social media campaign on a topic that they cared about. And this is, again, that idea of accessibility for all students, as well as modes of learning, levels of thinking. And so she designed one of their posts that would have been if they used Instagram. It was just on Teams, don't worry, we didn't use Instagram. But they posted their social media post here, and you can really see, the best part about this is during the continuing conflict of Ukraine and Russia. I had multiple perspectives of those students in my classroom, and they were able to present this very hard but meaningful and important topic in a respectful and really deep way because of this curriculum. I think this is still me, right? Yeah, okay, apologies. And then for student engagement, if that first slide didn't help enough, I honestly have never seen students so engaged in the spring for an 8th grader, ready to like be in a group and give feedback and, oh wait, but it's over? Yeah, we're not actually putting these somewhere on social media. This was where it was going. And yet students would, you could see that reflection. Lots of them wanted to take more action. They wanted to keep talking about the issues. And really in my 13 lucky years of teaching, this is the most I've seen in that, wait, we're done? We want more. So that was super exciting for me. Here's some of our student feedback. And again, I really appreciated how it tied students to realizing that Indigenous peoples aren't people that were from back then, but they're still here now, living in our communities and part of us as well. We'll give you a second. Okay. And U.S. history. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Siobhan Flanagan, and I am a U.S. history teacher at Redmond High School. I have to apologize after a day of teaching. I'm kind of losing my voice, so I won't talk for too awfully long here. This is the textbook that we're recommending for U.S. history for 11th graders. Up-to-date United States history content. It supports critical thinking skills, encourages multiple perspectives. There's lessons throughout each chapter that kind of key in on different groups and their experience in United States history. So chapters focusing on Indigenous folks, Black Americans, and just giving those multiple perspectives. It builds civic and cultural competency and meets all 5 social studies standards areas. So there's multiple maps for geography. Economics is featured in some lovely different graphics to help break down some of these more complex concepts for students, as well as social studies skills, and of course, history. Digital supports is one of the things that my students were really excited about when using this textbook. You can see up there, there's e-text that students can read. They can also listen to those e-texts. There's videos that I can show to students, or I can take that information and just present it to them. And then also there's a ton of different lesson summaries that break down the chapters and make it more accessible to students who are maybe not as competent readers, or students who are native Spanish speakers, translation options there, making this textbook very accessible to all students. Interactive resources, lesson plans for me. I am a relatively new teacher, so this resource has been incredibly useful for me as I navigate my first year's teaching. One of the things that one of my students was absolutely thrilled about, I took these textbooks out of the box, and you can imagine high schoolers not super excited about this giant book that I was presenting with them, but one of my students immediately flipped to the back, and she saw this picture of healthcare workers organizing test kits for COVID-19, and she was like, oh my gosh, history was last year, and it's in this book? So very cool to see the recent history represented in this textbook. And then another piece is in almost all of these topics or these chapters, there's connections to today. So ways that students can engage with the world they are currently living in and connect it to the past and see its relevance. Again, accessible for all students. Here are some examples you can see in that first shots fired. There's an audio option for a student to listen. That leveled lesson summary gives kind of a condensed explanation of that lesson. And then again, a Spanish translation at the top. Students can read it offline as well. Here's some of that student feedback. Multiple perspectives, thoroughly understood all the material presented to me. They were able to complete work at school and outside of school. There you go. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Monahan, and I am not new to teaching. This is year 30, and it's my first social studies adoption because that's how long the social studies books that we currently have been around. So I am here to speak on behalf of TCI Government Alive. And the thing that we really liked about it in the Committee of Teachers was it has a really strong scope and sequence to guide teachers. Very few teachers have a background in political science. We have history degrees. And since civics is really concept and process-based, the textbook is really important to help us fill in those conceptual gaps that we have. And a lot of the other textbooks are real grab bags of a lot of different stuff all over the place, which is interesting, but it doesn't actually give people the framework we need to understand what's going on. So the textbook supports really good critical thinking skills, has multiple perspectives and respects them. It builds civic and cultural competency, and it makes abstract concepts comprehensible to a wide variety of students. We have students taking civics in every grade from 9th through 12th in this district, so we need a text that can accommodate that. It has good digital supports. It has the online text. It has some good interactive resources. It has a civics library of applied social studies skills, which I had a lot of fun falling down the rabbit hole of and playing with the different things, and I can see that teachers will find them very useful. It has good lesson plans, unit guides, standards alignment, and good assessments. It's accessible and challenging for all students. It has translation capabilities with Spanish print materials and audio support, leveled texts and assessments in English and Spanish. It has an offline reader if people don't have access to the internet. It has good audio summaries and a reader that can read the text out loud. And it has some really solid primary source readings. The student feedback, I think, is most interesting in that students often really struggle to identify subtle biases. They can see the really obvious ones. But one of the things is when the students looked at that, they could see that there were different perspectives being shared and respected. And I thought that that was a very important feature of it. They found it easy to use both the digital and the paper materials, and they could really tie the things they'd learned back to things that were going on today. It felt very applicable. So that, I'm done.
And I am also short, but I am here, and I think you can hear me all through the microphone. My name is Crystal Stevens, and I'm the Social Studies Specialist, and I'm also going to be joined again by our student representative.
Anastasia Kanks-Basin.
And we are here to talk to you a little bit more about elevating equitable perspectives and our next step if this curriculum is approved. And part of that is thinking about the planning moving forward. So how will we continue to support teachers and students as they're learning with making sure that they're really continuing to have this positive experience that they had during the piloting? Part of that is considering supplemental materials. As we move into implementing materials, we always identify areas we want to add additional components to. Thinking about where we want to continue to partner and move forward. So we've used the Holocaust Center for Humanity before, especially because we have some legislative components that are tied into how we educate about Holocaust education. We've also partnered with the Snoqualmie tribe and other tribal groups. I know our after-school Native Ed program has been a great partner as well. Thinking about how do we really bring our partnership and that voice into the space as we integrate since time immemorial in 8th grade and beyond. Thinking about the Puget Sound Educational Service District. They've done amazing literacy support trainings for us as teachers are thinking about how are we supporting development of these skills and those additional components that we have embedded within a content area like social studies. And then things such as the collaboration that we've had with the Anti-Defamation League around anti-racist instructional practices and our own equity department. And how do we continue to move forward and guide both teachers and the content instruction in the space.
Hamaweweka Nania Sahito, Anastasia. Hello to everyone. My name is Anastasia Kanks-Basin. My given name is Hito. I am a 9th grader, a freshman at Eastlake High School in the Lake Washington School District. To start off, I would like to say how grateful I am to be here today to help support today's presentation and the importance of the Since Time Immemorial curriculum. I would like to give some background information on why I am here today. December of last year, I was given an assignment on writing a letter on a public policy, and I chose to highlight the Native American education inaccuracies in our district. I went through middle school learning from an outdated textbook and its interpretation of Native Americans, along with teachers doing their best to teach us accurately with resources that they were provided. That motivated me to do research on this topic, which led me to the Since Time Immemorial curriculum, leading me to cross paths with Ms. Stevens and starting to ask the questions on why our schools aren't teaching us accurately when it's a state law. In the end, that project was completed and sent here, but little did I know that was only the beginning. As a student of Lake Washington School District, I find our schools lack the knowledge and respect for our Native tribes. We keep educating our students as if Native Americans are the thing of the past. Even in Washington, we can't look left or right without saying a Native tribe's name. We name our cities and towns after them. They are Washington state history that still lives to this day. They are part of Washington state history. Did you know that in the state of Washington, there are 29 federally recognized tribes? Yet we don't know anything about them. We go in depth about ancient Greeks and Romans, Shakespeare and presidents, but none of us have lived during that time, nor have met them. Yet we have an understanding of them. Why can't we do the same for the people that are still here? Why can we not show that same respect? Our state recognizes the importance of accurately learning about our state's history, as it states in Bill 5433, when revised on July 24th of 2015, it shall incorporate curricula about history, culture, and government of the nearest federally recognized Indian tribes or tribes so that students learn about the unique heritage and experience of our closest neighbors. The Since Time Immemorial curriculum is a necessity in our schools because it begins to bridge the gap of understanding, educating us students to have a further and accurate knowledge of our community and our state for future generations. Isn't the point of education to be educated with the resources provided? As a reference, I was a sixth grader in middle school during 2019, and throughout middle school, 4 years after Bill 5433 was revised, I was not taught with the Since Time Immemorial curriculum. I am a freshman in high school. It's almost been 10 years after that bill has been revised, and I still haven't been taught with that Since Time Immemorial curriculum. I say this because I wish this was taught to me in school, what I should have been taught in school. We go to school to learn accurately, not just to be knowledgeable about our community, but also show respect to our community and for us to be aware of our community. Regardless of me being a Native student, I'm asking you as a student of the district to continue to support the Since Time Immemorial curriculum and further implement it in our schools. Ura, thank you.
And we're very lucky because Anastasia has had a very passionate experience and is open to partnering with us. So part of her sharing her story here tonight is because we want to give you that full picture and kind of that impetus, as Ms. Files also shared, around this integration and this ability to support teachers really in being able to do this well and move this forward for all students. And we're lucky that she's also volunteered to partner with us moving forward in implementation. So teacher teams have indicated that they would like to meet in vertical teams to do the alignment work for Since Time Immemorial, and we've begun to draft some of that alignment work. And we'll be working with our student partners and our community partners to get feedback on that and make sure that we're really meeting the needs of our students as we move forward. And for next steps, if our materials are approved, which we are hoping they will be tonight, we'll continue with our professional development because we know to sustain a positive change and support for all students, we need to make sure we're offering that strong training, continuing to partner with all the different districts or the departments that need to be incorporated, technology integration, making sure we're using our tools and leveraging them for student learning and multiple means of accessibility as much as possible, using our equity partners to make sure we're critically examining all of our work as we move forward, thinking about professional learning partners and where can we offer the most opportunities for teachers to engage and really feel supported in all areas, and then making sure that we're also continuing to pull in that student voice. Part of that, as I mentioned, is vertical revision, thinking about where are we hitting these pieces? How are we making sure students are experiencing and growing those skills in an intentional way that allows them to develop that critical thinking component in particular? making sure that we're providing choice. Those teachers can really customize the experience for the students in their classroom. We have 4 very different regions of our district, and we want them to have a common experience in meeting all standards, but flexibility to make sure that students are seeing their identities in those spaces. And then again, making sure that we're pulling in those tools from the office or OSPI and utilizing those as we're thinking about what are those supplemental needs that we need to pull back in. Where are we seeing additional needs for supports? And then identifying those and putting those through our instructional materials process and coming back to you with those suggestions as well.
So this, we wanted just to touch on that we've talked about in many of our adoptions, that as we think about overall adoptions, we think about instructional resources, that what you heard in the presentation tonight was a focus on diversity and perspectives and critical thinking and students feeling connected and seen in their learning and being able to take that learning to the larger world and to anything they want to do. So in all of our adoptions, this has been our focus, is thinking about those common elements of equity, opportunity, and access as we move further and deeper, and especially thinking about R2, thinking about how we are using universal design for inclusive and anti-racist practices, and how we're thinking about this aligned with standards and aligned with our 21st century skills and interdisciplinary skills. We continue to engage in learning, and we continue to engage in partnership, and so that research-based, culturally sustaining instructional practices are essential, as is our collaboration across the system with our teachers, with our students, with multiple departments, and with our community partners. And that as we're thinking about this, an adoption of instructional resources is not something that we do and then we leave it. It is something that's a long-term investment in professional learning and in partnership. So I wanted to recognize the team and just have a quick celebration of some of the work. This was really challenging. The content itself and this kind of thinking took deep commitment from our community, our adoption committee, during a time that was really challenging. We're super excited, clearly, about the resources we brought to you last spring and that we have right now, and that we're continuing our commitment for providing students access to these resources. We feel like there's a change in how we think about learning, and that's reflected in the resources that we bring to the work and the students and how we think about them and how we engage in as a larger community. So I wanted to celebrate, and I also want to recognize the adoption committee, who's been working at this point for 3.5 years. And that they've changed from an adoption committee to an implementation committee and has been expanding, to the multiple departments and directors and teachers and staff members who continue to work with us to ensure diverse perspectives, the pilot teachers who really just went over and above, and the students who continue to engage in this committee work in the pilot and shared their feedback. We want to thank everyone for their part in this change in instructional resources and in our thinking around social studies. And wanted to thank you for your time and see if you have any questions for our group.
Thank you. We will see if we have any questions. Director Stewart.
I want to thank you too. To be quite frank, this is one of the presentations I wait for, because science didn't help me in school, math didn't help me in school, but provide my own integrated, but that's beside the point. But history and civics are what I live for to get in school. And I thank you for it. I'm just sorry that it took so long for y'all to get this update of the materials. I'm glad you've done it so thoroughly. And hopefully the materials from here on out will be much better. When my son went through Washington State history, and I looked at the book, and I said, that's it? I was shocked. I was a little angry, mainly because that's my background. Mm-hmm. But I tell you, it really gives me hope to see that we're going to have some more meaningful materials. Yes, what I got in civics or Oklahoma State history was a whitewash, but I also went to school at the same time that Russell Means was making headlines, and Dee Brown had written Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, so that supplemented my knowledge. And I want to thank you thoroughly. And if there's anything that can be done to help, holler.
Thank you. One note I'll say, on timing is that we actually did accelerate this adoption by several years because we did see a need in the resources. And it's an interesting need for all kinds of resources. Literally, resources we were using were disappearing off platforms, never to be seen again, even for companies we had contracts with. So we accelerated the adoption, moved it up several years, and combined middle school and high school because we as a system saw it was a need to have updated resources. And we have to pace ourselves as a district with the capacity we have for adoptions and the money we have for adoptions. And this was one that we really felt was important to have it be 6 through 12 and accelerate so that we had resources in the hands of teachers and we'd been teachers and in different pockets, we'd been using STI since it had begun to be developed, but we wanted to do it systemically, and that was part of our drive to accelerate the adoptions.
Director Choi.
Two quick questions. You mentioned the availability of the text, the digital text in multiple languages, Spanish and English. Is there other languages that are also included, or are those the two ends?
Yeah. So we have looked primarily at Spanish as far as a published material because of the potential to roll up dual language and making sure that we have an accessible option with that. But then our technology integration partners have been very intentional about making us and teachers very aware about the use of the Edge browser and the translation component there. So with these secondary materials, they will, if pulled open in the Edge browser, translate through. And with EduCurious, because it's a OneNote-based curriculum, we can also use some of the embedded language supports within OneNote.
Awesome. And then my other question was, you mentioned that with these new adopted curriculum, there's an opportunity for the information to be continually updated as things change. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on that. Are you talking about like the additional resources that are available that are continuously updated, or is the digital text actually
I can have any one of these folks talk to the specifics, but with almost all of our digital resources that we've adopted in a few years, they're very responsive. So like Amplify for our middle school ELA, if a major event happens in the world, within 2 days, it's on the front page, like related resources are on their landing page for Amplify. K-5 Math, we adopted Illustrative Mathematics last year. It can be a frustration because things get updated and change how they look, but they added a huge parent portal this past year that was wonderful. They add resources, additional, right now, one of the big news pieces that they have are the centers. All of the centers that are physical centers as well are now online so that students can manipulate on their computers. So our expectation is that resources are continually adapted, and that's frequently part of our contract, is when the better thing comes available, we get that. But I don't know if you want to speak specifically to these ones.
Essentially, I would say what Dr. Rose's answer is would be correct. So especially with social studies, one of the common components is current events. So that's one of the things that was really highlighted as a component that we can often see, and they have been very responsive to feedback even from the pilot, which is part of the reason that 8th grade also paused, is the publishers took some of our initial feedback and questions that we had for them and did work over the summer, and that's why we came back to them in fall of this year.
And I actually, as long as Maria is in the room, I want to call out the impact that she has had on national curriculum. We use Amplify ELA in our middle school, and Maria had noted some of our teachers had noted some issues with how teachers were given resources to teach around the Gold Rush and some of the resources that were used with Amplify. And so we met with them. We met with their curriculum development department about just over a year ago. And they, about 3 weeks ago, they met with us, they took us very seriously, and about 3 weeks ago said, we've completely redesigned this unit. We'd like you to pilot it, we'd like your feedback on it, and this is now going to be what we provide as part of this curriculum that we offer nationally, because your district is so engaged in giving critical feedback. So I just want to recognize the power of that process and call out with our teachers how thoughtful and engaged they are in ensuring that not only do we have great curriculum, but that our voice is heard.
Director Liberty.
When is the last time we adopted a
social studies
curriculum for these grades?
I'm trying to remember the specific dates. 2006 or 2007. Yeah, depends on middle school or high school, 2006 or 2007.
Okay. And you said we accelerated the schedule for this adoption, so by a couple of years. So that is it really that the typical adoption cycle is
10 to 14 years? Yeah. It has been, and part of that is a lot of that is financial capacity.
Sure.
To be able to think about like our math adoption, the core resources were $1.4 million.
Yeah.
And then there's additional costs for all those pieces. So in order to have timely adoptions, we have to think about how we use resources. So we continue to look at, like, some of the resources that we looked at that we'll use as supplemental. We've actually already proved them as supplemental, are open educational resources. So we'll continue to look at that, but our first priority is quality resources. And open educational resources are just now coming into their heyday of being quality. They've been there, but not something that we could really look at. So there are many different factors that go into the timing of when we can adopt resources.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to ask a bit of a leading question, but I think it's important. Over the last few years, I've had a chance to meet with, students from a number of our Black student unions, families representing our Black African American students, parents representing our Hispanic Latino students, families representing our indigenous students. And a consistent theme that I hear from those families and students is that our curriculum is stereotypical. It doesn't bring an asset-based approach. It doesn't tell the true history of their families, their culture, their history. And so can you talk about the evaluation of these curricula with that in mind, knowing that it is good for our students of color to see themselves represented, but it's also important that students that identify in other racial groups also receive an appropriate understanding and true history of other groups as well. Can you just talk about that evaluation in a little bit more detail? Because I think it's an important aspect to our curriculum adoption process.
So in the learning year, specific to social studies, we did it for K-5 science and we did it for the secondary ELA, but specific to social studies, I can list some of the learning that we did. So we've deeply focused in on standards, and the standards are new as of fall 2020. But really, to your point, what we focused in on was working with the equity department and doing research and bringing in additional support. So we actually had someone that we were working with from the Anti-Defamation League who helped us think about how we designed our process. We had learning sessions with the team, with the committee that were focused on how intersectionality plays out as we think about curriculum. We had multiple sessions in thinking about how identity and equity show up in curriculum, and thinking about what a curriculum would need to look like, or instructional resources would need to look like, in order to be both representative and flexible. So it's an interesting tension between it's not just having lots of resources or lots of things, it's also a mindset in how those are developed and organized, and really importantly, how a teacher thinks about them. So in our adoptions now, they're actually, we call them instructional resources, and we focus in on instructional practices even before we pass out the code to access any of the resources. That it's really important to think about how things are taught before you get to what is taught. So that's been something that, as we thought about evaluating resources, we use those multiple lenses, including the OSPI has a tool that's a relatively recent release, that's their screening for biased materials. That's actually really meant to be what you use to review your resources after you've adopted them, to really ensure that you have those multiple perspectives there, and knowing there is never going to be a resource that does everything for everyone. Absolutely not. But that in how teachers think about the resources is in thinking about how they do meet the needs of all students in their classroom. So what are the instructional resources that they would need to support that, and what is the instructional mindset that helps that come to pass? So the year that we had in learning was very intense, and it was 2019-2020. And thinking about the changes that happened in that year were deeply impactful to our thinking about how we select resources where students can really see themselves and feel respected, and be able to engage in civic responsibilities. So I don't know, Crystal, if there's anything you'd add about our learning or thinking?
I would just say, too, as part of that lens also, that authentic authorship is a huge component. So there was a component of the group thinking about their rubrics and the evaluation components of, if we're talking about a specific perspective or group of people within a historical context, Are we, as much as is possible with historical resources, centering the resources that have that authentic voice, which is part of the reason, too, that since time immemorial is so important for us with this integration component and thinking about our forward planning, is because it was designed by the 29 tribes that are federally recognized within our state. So that's one very concrete example of that. I'm sure that the teachers who presented could provide more right off the top of hand around other perspectives. I would also say that we had student representatives who were on some of those groups that you had referenced, the student union at Eastlake. We had a parent who represented a very strong affinity group of parents from Juanita. So we try as much as possible to make sure those stakeholder voices were woven throughout the learning year, the evaluation, the student feedback, and moving forward.
One last question. Can you, knowing that we have somewhere between 70 and 80% of our teaching staff are identify as Caucasian, can you talk about the professional learning that will go into these social studies curriculums to ensure that our staff are continuing to understand maybe changes in the curriculum, but also instructional practices that actually lead to an inclusive environment where students see themselves in the curriculum represented accurately and really which leads to a sense of belonging in our classrooms. Can you talk about the professional learning as well?
Yes, and that is ongoing work, and that's not separate from our district work as well. So this year in all of secondary, we have provided, a teaching and learning department has provided and partnered with special education, partnered with equity to provide content area-based learning around universal design for learning and inclusive practices. And that's include thinking about ways that we're using assessments in order to help all students have access and be successful. So that's part of the background work. As far as adoption and implementation, we're starting with thinking about the resources themselves and in the training for the resources themselves, making sure that perspective of here's why we chose this one. And the training is coming from the designers or the people who provided the curriculum, the initial training, and having them be able to highlight the design behind the curriculum. And much of that is around inclusive practices or the equity aspects that we're talking about. So the design of the curriculum itself and then understanding how to teach it reflects some of those priorities. We're just at the point of implementation for these pieces. So as we go forward, as we're planning for these 3 courses for next year, we will continue our partnership. So for example, like in our ELA adoption, we partnered with Puget Sound ESD, Educational Service District. And before, that one was a specific one, that before teachers opened or clicked on my perspectives, they had 6 hours of anti-racist teaching practice and professional learning on anti-racist teaching practices. So that's something that we're going to continue. And the steering committee, the implementation or the adoption committee that's turning into the implementation committee, that will be in their purview. So this group that's done this thinking and learning, that has made these choices, will also be the group that is consulting and designing what the learning path will look like for our teachers. Again, in consultation with our equity department, with our special education department, and with our external partners. So it'll continue to be dynamic. Every time we have an opportunity to work with our teachers, we have multiple small teams actually coming together for months to say what's really important for our teachers now and what's important that we need to continue. So those tensions of what is in front of us that we need to address and what are those core values around equity and multi-tiered systems of support and inclusion that we want to make sure that we address in professional learning. The other piece, just to add to that, that's essential is teacher collaboration. That when we're really thinking about teacher growth, even though we'll provide wonderful professional learning, it's the relationships that teachers have with each other, and as they're having conversations about how to best meet the needs of their students and listening to their students, that really make a difference in practice.
I don't have another question, but I do want to thank Anastasia for coming tonight. Your urgency and your passion to ensure that all students in Lake Washington do receive an appropriate education is phenomenal, and thank you for your partnership in this work. And tonight would not have been the same without your voice in this space, so thank you for being here tonight. And I will turn my mic off now.
One thing, I would just like to echo that on behalf of myself and the board, Anastasia, for coming, and appreciate the work in partnership with students and parents and staff and looking at the social studies curriculum and really advancing it and bringing those voices to the table. So appreciate the process and the holisticness that has gone forward. With that, Director Stewart, I believe you had something.
One last thank you from me again. What the work you folks do in this area, it creates better citizens, better voters, and better neighbors. And that's what it's all about, and that's what makes everything work from here on out. The other aspects of learning have lots of other facets to it, but this is, to me, the most important facet of social studies, civics, history, because we are at a point in our society where everybody's at each other's throats, it seems, and if we don't start learning more about each other, it's, God knows what's going to happen. But thank you. And especially, to be quite frank, having the student here was great, because I know the only way that I got a better depth of learning of Native American culture was through my fellow students. And that was the way that I got it, and the resources they could give me. Thank you.
Director Choi?
I had a follow-up question for Dr. Holman, actually. I was curious, after curriculum adoption like this, do we, is it process or part of the protocol to go back after an implementation and survey, for example, certain student populations about whether or not the changes in the curriculum have been impactful or what we've desired?
I didn't catch the last part of your question, but I believe it was...
The math does not help.
Sorry.
Do we ever go back and survey whether or not what we are trying to achieve with our changes in our curriculum adoption are actually achieving?
Thank you. We have not to date surveyed our students about that. Typically, we're talking with our staff and things like that about that, but given what we're trying to accomplish, in particular with our social studies curriculum, it may be a good idea to have that be an ongoing dialogue, since our curriculum adoption process really isn't a single point in time any longer. It's really about adoption and review on an ongoing basis. So, absolutely.
I'd like just to encourage, I have a note here, need a direct question to students in regards to how these curriculums impact them after they've been implemented. So getting that sort of feedback and that loop in does make a lot of sense. Any other questions for those who've been presenting? Then I want to say thank you very much, because at this point I will take a motion to approve the social studies curriculum adoption as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Director Stewart and second by Director LaLiberty to approve the social studies curriculums as presented. Any further discussion? It seems like there's consensus. Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Congratulations and thanks for all your work. So thank you. I don't know if you all would be amenable for like a 5-minute break. Okay, I'm actually going to give it a 10-minute break. It's 8, because we'll never be back in 5. It's 8:18 right now. At 8:30, please be back on the dais ready to go. All right, we are back from our break. Thank you very much. So our next item on our agenda is our first results for this year, 2023. We did do results 3, which was social and emotional, actually it's life skills and global citizenship, I believe, was done last fall, and now we will be doing results 2 and results 1. So results 2 is the academic content, knowledge, and skill, and this is where we sort of look at the requests from what we expect the superintendent to be able to accomplish in the district in regards to the outcomes. And so with that, I will pass this off to Dr. Holman for the introduction.
Yeah, thank you. And so results 2.
interrupt one more time. Just so you are aware, the idea for tonight, we'll do what's called basically a first reading. So after the presentation, we'll have discussion, ask questions, those pieces, but we will not be taking a motion this evening, and we will do that at the next board meeting in March. But this will be a time for the discussion. If you have questions, if there's other further questions, that'll be the time to do so.
Director Blazer, may I ask a clarifying question on that?
Sure.
Is the idea when this thing comes back for a second reading and approval that we'll have a board, a written summary of the board's conversations, findings that will also be part of the pack at that time?
That would be the ideal, depending how this conversation goes, yes.
Okay. No.
Thank you, Dr. Holman. Go ahead.
Yes, so results 2 focuses on the academic content, knowledge, and skills that the board has identified as the outcomes for students in Lake Washington. The policy opens by stating that each student will demonstrate mastery of content knowledge, skills, and competency necessary to create, collaborate, think critically, and solve problems. Students will achieve reasonable progress as demonstrated through multiple measures on state and district required standards in each of, and there's a number of areas that the board has identified, specifically literacy and language, mathematical reasoning and practices, science, social studies, computer science and information and technology, the arts, and world language. And so tonight, Associate Superintendent Dr. Rose will be providing the presentation to the board regarding results 2. Dr. Rose?
Thank you. So as Dr. Holman said, this is where we really are looking at the specifics around these 7 different academic content areas. What I wanted to do before we get into thinking specifically about the results that we had this year was thinking about where this work is located within the larger frame of our district work, and to acknowledge that when we look at the results of this year, we are looking at a moment in time and efforts that are a multi-year effort or multi-year thinking about how we are supporting all of our students to success. So a few things I wanted to call out that are happening in the system before we look at the data is thinking about, as we entered this year, and as we entered thinking about the past several years, we actually really been focused on deepening our focus on multi-tiered systems of support and inclusion and equity. And I say deep in focus because we actually started our explicit work on MTSS, I believe, in 2017. And we did a beginning introduction of that work at that time. One of the things that's been the impact over the past several years is really recognizing that this work has urgency, as we heard in several comments tonight. This work has urgency and needs more specific targeted depth. So that is the frame of the work that we've been doing this year. And a specific example of that is all of our schools this year used the Fidelity Integrity Assessment Tool, which is an essential tool to evaluate how is each school, and then how are we as a system doing in specific measures, behaviors, aspects of providing ways that each and every student can be successful. And an example of an element of the FIA is Tier 1 instruction. And so this year, as we've looked at how do we strengthen our entire system and how do we strengthen our academics, for the first time, all of our schools utilized the FIA to do a self-assessment and then plan out work this year specifically based on their findings from the FIA. To support them with that work, we've had a principal on special assignment whose overarching goal is to assist in implementing MTSS, and by that I mean for the principals or the schools to look at their results from the FIA and think, how do they take it to the next step? How do they go from wherever they are to the next step in supporting learning for all students? In addition to that, and this actually falls in line with the FIA, we've really focused this year on providing professional learning resources for universal design for learning. And you heard me mention that when I talked about social studies. That's been true for all of our secondary content areas as explicit instruction around, or explicit professional learning around universal design for learning. And in elementary, it's been more embedded. As we've done training on our illustrative mathematics curriculum, we've explicitly, and I'll talk about this when we get into math, we've explicitly called out how are teachers providing access points for all students. And we've had a whole system focus on inclusion. And what that has meant for our work is that we have worked as a system and as individual schools and as classrooms to be as specific as we can about what does inclusion actually mean. How are we supporting individual learners, our learners with most significant needs to access learning? And how are we using that as a way to reflect all of our learning as a system and ensure all students have access? In that as well, we have instructional coaches in our full inclusion schools who are working on supporting inclusive instruction. So there are many different ways they work in the building, but their specifics, one of their main charges is thinking about how they're supporting all teachers, not just teachers who have students with special education, who are being served in special education in the classrooms. How are they supporting all teachers to be able to have more effective instruction that focuses on inclusion? So that's from a larger systems level as we think about large foci in our district. Other efforts, and you heard that this again, aspects in our social studies adoption, that we have specialists from multiple departments providing and facilitating professional learning. So an example of that is as we are, and we've always had, of course, organic collaboration happening. Now, before we provide professional learning to our buildings, and I can be very specific, on March 1st, when we're providing learning to all of our secondary teachers, or on March 10th, when we're providing professional learning to all of our elementary teachers for K-5 math. Before that work goes out to the system, we have specialists from teaching and learning, special education, multilingual learners, and equity look at the learning and evaluate it to see, is this the best that it possibly can be, and does it speak to all the different ways that we want the learning to impact our students? So we're putting in these systems to make sure that our professional learning is improving to a very specific focus. We have, we're working with department chairs to align our work and think about how that plays out in buildings. We have content area advisories that you heard a little bit about what social studies looks like. We have that in math, ELA, and science, and art and health and PE, in order not just to think about quality content area resources, but really to think about how are we supporting inclusive practices, equity, and MTSS, which then reflects in academic achievement. So all of this collaboration is happening across multiple departments and divisions. At the school level, again, just setting the stage for what happens across our system, all schools set academic goals as part of the school improvement planning process. You have hundreds of pages in your consent agenda today about school improvement plans, and as you dove into them, I'm sure that you saw our elementary schools are really focusing in on literacy and on math, and you're seeing the same thing, and very specific at our middle schools and high schools. You probably saw more specific to learners who have not been successful yet in our schools. The school improvement plans are very focused on overall academics and then learners that we need to really focus in on more. So based on that data, based on their school improvement plan, and then based on a variety of different data, schools identify and implement strategies for groups of students who are not performing at grade level. That could be our FastBridge data, that could be grade level data. Depending on the school and the level, there are multiple different sets of data that, as part of standard practice, school intervention teams are reviewing that data and identifying, providing instructional response cycles. That also comes into play with our principal and teacher student growth goals, where as a system, we are holding ourselves accountable for student growth. And that work will intensify over the next few years as the state adopts new student growth goals, but it's something that's core to what we think of now. We hold ourselves very deeply accountable for that. And as I had mentioned earlier, teachers collaborating together, PLCs using school data protocols to inform instruction, using data to be able to look at how students are achieving and have that be something that they target and they plan for, is standard practice in our schools. So with that, that's the background of things that we're doing. As we look at the overall data, what we see in the trend lines, and the trend lines are mostly in the appendices, they show similar performance or some growth for all student group from last year. So we're seeing, within that, we see many of the achievement of Black, Hispanic, multilingual, and students receiving special education consistently falls far below or well below, with a few exceptions. So that's something that while we've got that general, have similar performance or some growth for all students, it is really concerning to us and really of our focus to be able to think about the students that have not been achieving our targets. That's something that has been historical. So that's something that we, like I said, in thinking about MTSS, this has been a journey that we're continuing to expand upon. I wanted to highlight, especially before we look at trend lines, just to recognize that last year was really challenging, and that last year was really challenging, and we were in response to a really challenging year the year before, that our students coming back into schools had there were significant challenges in terms of thinking about the learning that they did achieve when they were in remote learning. Some of the issues that came with COVID in terms of students having a sense of belonging and being connected through their school. So I just wanted to recognize that, not as an excuse, but just to recognize that's where we were. And to recognize for teachers and for schools, especially this time last year, December, January, February last year, there were some schools that had 30% teacher absences on a regular basis. And so I want to recognize that we all are working very hard, and that last year was just a tough year for us. Not an excuse, but something that we recognize that as a system, that's part of the reason why there's so many bullet points in those first slides. We know that we have to really ramp up our response because it was a challenging year for students, and we have a responsibility to respond appropriately. So the first area to look at is literacy. And so if you look at the trend data, it's interesting because you'll see, again, like for the overall all students on ELA, we see fairly flat, or we see a little bit of a dip the year before in the 2021 school year, and then we went up a little bit in the 21-22 school year. The exception that's very interesting is grade 10 had, actually I'm sorry, that'll come in with math. So when it comes to thinking about ELA, we had, again, standard about the same performance with some improvements that were hopeful when we looked at all learners. But when we look at the subgroups of learners, we really recognize that we have a significant amount of work to do. And so what some of that work looks like, and actually, so when we look at Smarter Balance, and again, Smarter Balance over the past 2 years has some anomalies with how it was administered, just in terms of the timing and the test that was how it was given to students. But we absolutely see that there's a significant issue that we need to address. One note is that grade 10 ELA looks like we took a big dive locally. We actually had a higher rate of, I'll call it refusal, but it was, some of the students were refusal and some were absences, but anytime a student doesn't take the test, it counts as a 0. So in 1920, we had a 3% refusal rate. Last year, it was 9%. So it was a significant number of zeros that got added into our overall score. So we'll continue to watch that. One of the interesting things about, for pretty much all of our benchmarking scores is we stay pretty typically in 1 to 2 spots of where we've been the year before, and that's been true over time. So one of the things that we are really interested in, that's why our efforts were something that we really have designed a whole system approach, is that staying about stable is not what we want. We want to actually be able to move significantly. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about with literacy and language. When we look at our more local metrics, like looking at FastBridge or looking at percent of students earning full ELA credit, those are ones that when they're more locally controlled, we're seeing more positive growth. Absolutely significant room, significant needs that we need to address. But in thinking about where we've been over the past 2 years, we see some positive pieces in it. And I think about, so like with ELA, we've been focused in on instruction. That was, last year was our year for implementing new materials for secondary ELA. And so those were the teachers that received 6 hours of anti-racist instructional practices and then got new resources and then continued to engage in thinking and professional learning around practice. So there are quite a few different things happening in our system. Significant pieces for literacy. We are about 3 years out from a K-5 literacy adoption. Typically, as you know, we'd have a 2-year process leading up to the adoption. With literacy, we're starting that process a year early because we know that this is something that is very important, our students have significant needs. So we have started a reading advisory this year. We've also invested and continue to invest in structured reading professional learning for K-2 teachers. As we look at our foundational literacy, we absolutely identified that this was a need. We'd intended for this learning to happen in the 2019-2020 school year, knowing that we needed to put significant time into supporting our teachers with professional learning, and it just was not able to happen. We tried to get it rebooted last year, but with a lack of substitute teachers, we were not able to. So this year is the year that we're really rebooting professional learning for K-2 teachers. In the schools, we use the data protocol and student intervention teams. We've been engaging in learning and developing guidance on assessment. We have the middle school and high school ELA advisories, which you've heard about. And then we're continuing, and this will be true, I have these bullet points for all of our content areas. We are continuing in all content areas to expand inclusionary practices, and specific really to literacy and math are the primary. We're including co-teaching. We're expanding that as one of our responses to inclusionary practices. And we're continuing our training on universal design for learning, and then continuing to think about how we're using assessment for learning. When we move on to math, we see very similar
Hang
data
on,
points.
Dr. Rose, if I could
Oh, yeah.
it might be easier if we stop after literacy and language and go ahead and take questions at that point, if there are any.
Yes, I have one.
Okay, Director Liberty.
Thank you. I had you referred to, I think the term of, I don't know if term of art is even the right term. You referred to refusals for the, I think it was the 10th grade Smarter Balance Assessment.
Yes.
And, okay, so I have a few questions just around that to help you understand the data. Is that a passing grade on that examination required for a requirement for graduation?
There are multiple pathways.
That's what I thought. And how long has that been the case? How long has that always been the case?
There's always been, so students could always take it again. So if you didn't pass it in 10th grade, and I'm trying to remember the specific, like in the before times, you would take it again in the fall of your junior year, and then you could take it again in the spring. So if you didn't take it then, you had multiple opportunities to take it. You also have multiple ways to demonstrate, especially right now, for the class of, for this year still, there are multiple ways that you can get to graduation that do not include passing this test.
Okay. And in, for example, 2018, 2019, were there multiple pathways then? What I heard was that we are attributing one of the reasons. I actually don't want to put words in your mouth. So my question, I guess, first question is: Are we attributing one of the reasons for the decline in students passing the Smarter Balance assessments to an increase in the number of students either electing or not being able to take the examination?
So Tim Krieger has this information more at his fingertips than I do. That's back in my notes. But I believe that if he did the calculation that if we pulled out the students that, I'll say again refusal, but it could have been absences.
Yes, right.
That our all rate would have been at about 89%.
Okay.
So, and historically, I think we've been probably in the 2 to 3% refusal. So that's one that we'll have to look at to understand why it was, what the impact is now as we look at it the next year.
Okay.
So for many years, there's been multiple ways to accomplish your English language arts or mathematics graduation requirement. The primary way for many years was pass your state assessment, and then there were some, I guess, alternatives to that. Now we have, I think it's 8 or 9 different graduation pathways, which passing your state assessments is one of those pathway options.
Okay, great.
And so even if a student has met their graduation pathway requirement, we still seat them for the exam. And so we don't know if there's going to be greater refusal going into the future because it's no longer a graduation requirement.
Yeah.
But for benchmarking and district evaluation, our hope is that we continue to have the majority of our students test. You'll see in 11th grade science, we have historically seen very low participation. We got a smile over there in the corner from Evan. I think he may not have participated. So, no, he did. Okay.
So all of that's great, and I think it's great that we have multiple pathways. And I'm hesitant to say these words out loud. It's fine. I'll frame it this way. It's fine that our students are finding other ways to meet the requirement for graduation than passing the Smarter Balance assessment. For purposes of this report and trying to unpack the data, we're trying to determine is this drop a function of more students not taking the exam, not taking it seriously, being unable to take the exam, or is it a function of something else? And so I'm struggling with how to unpack those things by looking at this data. So that might have been a rhetorical question. I think I just did one.
No, it's good.
So that's and I don't know enough about data science to be able to unpack that, but that's the issue when I look at this, that I'm having a hard time. Because I do appreciate that certainly part of I suspect that part of the drop is due to those factors, but what is and what isn't? Because sorry, and I'll end my monologue. If it is, it is more worrisome if it is not a function of students finding other ways of meeting the requirement. Okay.
So what would be, if you could go to the slide right before this one. So if you look at the grade 10, it actually shows we're up 10 points in regards to percentage.
Yes,
right?
from last year.
And so that's a piece of the challenge actually that I find within the way the data is presented in the tables, is because COVID created such an odd experience in some ways. And what's missing here is all the subgroups being broken out in a similar fashion, so we could see, are there certain students who perhaps didn't make that jump, and is that a group that we should be targeting? Right, so if I look at low income, if I were to break out low income students in grade 10, how does their trend line look across there? And that information isn't here to give me that idea, and I think that's a concern that I have in regards to a piece of it. But I do think that annual trend challenge it has to be over those time frames, because COVID did such a interesting blip through things as we move forward.
Can I say one more thing? Sure. What you said was much more incisive than what I said, but I'm still going to sort of try to rephrase what I was trying to say. Sorry, Dr. Rose, could you go back to the slide that showed the trend line? Yes. So for figure 5, what I have a hard time unpacking. Well, or are we back? But this is simply a function of more students now, I'll put it colloquially, not taking the exam seriously than there were in 2018, 2019. Or are our students? Is student performance in fact on par? Because what we're looking for is what is student performance with this.
So I think the question might lie is a sort of a deeper dive concept into what this means.
Yes.
Is it by refusal that's occurring, or is it other reasons?
I appreciate one of the things, something else Dr. Holman added, which is, well, it's not just students, not taking it. There's some students who, if they don't need it to graduate, maybe they're doodling instead of.
Yes.
Right.
Director Choi.
I was just going to add, if it is a byproduct of multiple graduation pathways and students are electing alternative pathways, then is there a way for us to get the same information, but perhaps it's no longer the SBA to answer that question?
Even better.
And my thought will be that will end up in results 1, where we look overall.
To be honest, I don't believe that the 9%, I guess the increase in 6% of students not taking it is due to graduation requirements, primarily because if you're in 10th grade, you've only had a year and 7-8 months of school to attain graduation requirements, and so you really haven't had the opportunity, the majority of students haven't had the opportunity to be able to meet one of the other pathway options by this point. And so I hear the board asking for some additional unpacking of these data. I think there's a couple of different ways that we could provide follow-up in regards to this specific area. One is to provide the data for students who actually sat for the test. What were the outcomes? So that's actually evaluating the students who participated. Because we did have such a larger refusal, I think the other thing is, of those who refused, how many met their graduation requirement already? So it's just a couple of different elements in these data that we could provide.
Go ahead, Director Liberty.
Well, okay,
since it's all your question.
I know. But I guess let's be a little more explicit. My interest is, what I want to know is, there was a drop, which I think was largely attributed to COVID. How have we are we recovering? Have we recovered? And so what you are offering to provide is helpful, Dr. Holman, but I don't know if it's possible to do that going back 4 years as well. Because I want to be able to compare the historical trend here. And it very well may not be, but that's my interest, is compare. I want to be able to know if is student performance down 7% since 2019?
So I was going to Evan, then Director Stewart.
I just wanted to echo that generally from a overall student perception standpoint, it's basically just take the state assessment, take it seriously, and you don't have to worry about graduating any other way. I recognize that there are a variety of other graduation pathway options, but to be entirely honest, most students encounter those other options at the point at which they need them, rather than them going to the counseling website and going to the drop-down menu for graduation pathways, finding which is the easiest for them, because the easiest is just the state assessment. So I'm absolutely not saying that it doesn't warrant a deeper dive, but I am saying from a overall student perception standpoint, it's basically just take the state assessment relatively seriously and never have to worry about it again.
Thank you. Director Stewart.
My only concern about waiting until we have a longer trend line is that we go from 3 times as many to 4 times as many to 5, and we start having a problem that all of a sudden we could have caught earlier. I don't know if it's a matter of incentivizing somehow to making it more worthwhile. I can imagine anything more worthwhile than graduating from high school, but that's beside the point. But if there is a way to incentivize the idea of taking the test more so than it already is, I don't know if there is, but how does our tripling compare to other districts? Mm-hmm. Is this being seen throughout the state? Is it just us?
I don't have that information. I do know that a large chunk of our students that did not take the assessments were in online education at that time, and so I don't know if that was something that contributed to it was just more difficult to take the assessment. So that's something we can definitely unpack more to understand who wasn't taking the assessment and really where are they now.
And so the only other is the grade 3 literacy, and I know that grade 2 utilizing FastBridge shows about 1/5 of our students not reaching standards at that point, and recognizing that literacy, and actually we had a public comment in regards to that this evening, and thinking about that and knowing dyslexia and the impact that it has. So it would be great to see that broken out more to truly understand, because if I were to choose a target area as I think about this as to where we get to, the hope is, right, that we have all students, that we're at 95%, and we typically have about 85%, and we're not quite there yet. But who is it that needs to get targeted into those areas? And, appreciate the top picture that was provided. Mm-hmm. And that's that question then, is there more we need to be targeting here to make sure we capture these students? And I'm not sure there's a clear picture of who those students are.
Mm-hmm. We can definitely bring more data in, but that is when we look at the response, that's really where we're putting an enormous amount of energy, is thinking about our K-2 students and thinking about how we support them specifically. And that's in line with our work around the dyslexia legislation and our work with all building leaders to think about how they're supporting their teachers, working with all students in there. But I hear the request for more specific data about who are the learners that we're talking about and how does that directly apply.
And the other piece, and this would be true through math as well, is I believe FastBridge, if I remember correctly, we're now doing in every grade, correct?
K-8, yes.
So the possibility for a cohort data to follow to see that as the kids are with us, are we moving them up that and improving along the way? So that gives an idea here. So as we try to think about reasonable progress, are we seeing movement and growth in those areas? So I guess that's the other piece that I would ask that we try to think about tackling in this piece, to give a little more longevity to it. And I guess I should be saying that to you probably more directly than to you, so I apologize. So Dr. Holman, to you.
And that's what we're excited about with the FastBridge data, is that the first year that we implemented it was in a COVID year, so we were implementing remotely and training teachers remotely, and then we came back and we were in our we were piloting in in 2020, in the spring of 2020, and then implementing in 2020-21. And so last year was really the first year that we were giving the assessment with more fidelity. And again, it was in a time period that was a little chaotic. And I feel like, to your point, last year we solidified it, and this year we're really using it, and so now we're able to build that cohort knowledge and understanding of those students. So that's exciting to have that tool be
That would be
stronger.
great, just to be able to start to see that component.
Mhm.
Any other questions for the literacy and language? Director La Liberty?
I guess I have a question for you, Dr. Bleacher. So part of tonight is to ask questions, but also to voice any comment, which sometimes we do in the form of questions. Are you wanting, just in terms of structure, would you like the board to do that now or wait until the conclusion of the presentation? Should we do it subject by subject? I'm trying to be orderly.
What would be easier? I was thinking subject by subject, but perhaps that would get redundant over time.
Yeah, I think let's have the presentation. My vote would be to have the presentation conclude, and then we can move back.
Thoughts? Okay. Going on.
Okay. So to your point, Director La Liberty, we will have some repetition of conversation because we are seeing similar things across content areas. So when we look at math, we see again, even more dramatically, that we had work to do before COVID with all students, and that we, like most other districts, were significantly impacted in math, in our students' achievement in math, even more than in literacy. And there's a whole bunch of theorizing about why that might be, but the reality is we absolutely were, so we have more work to do in thinking about that. So overall, again, looking at the trend lines, you can see that we've made some positive growth since we hit last year, but there are significant needs that we need to address, and you can really clearly see that when we look at the Smarter Balance data again. And again, we're again looking at those learners that are most frequently the furthest from social justice, that are in need of most support, that are the focus of our work. So as in literacy, we are dedicating significant resources. So again, like thinking about when we look at Smarter Balance, we can look at our trend lines and say there are positive things happening, and then we look at our actual data and say, from benchmarking, we're within 1 to 2 of where we've been over time, but our students have significant needs that we need to address. When we look at our students in our local data, again, that's more positive than Smarter Balanced. And again, we can make some suppositions as to we've really focused it on math instruction over the past few years, especially at middle school and at high school. Separate from the K-5 curriculum adoption has been an intense focus as well. We had this past year, this was our first year with illustrative mathematics. So part of this story could be it was our first year with a very different curriculum, and there's typically an implementation dip. So in thinking about all of the different factors, we were also asking our teachers to use really new, different curriculum that we're certain is powerful and focused on culturally sustaining practices and terrific for our students, and complex and difficult. It took some time to begin to wrap our heads around, and that's why it's been a continued focus this year as well. When we look at our students in terms of our local data, again, students earning 9th grade, or students earning full math credit with a grade of C or higher, for most of our student groups, that continues to go up. One of the things, just to recognize, one of the things that happened with COVID, I think in every district across the nation, is I'll use the word uncovered, and that's not the right word. It made very, very visible the learning disparities. And our students who struggled most with learning before COVID struggled even more. So to your point, Director Bleaser, and thinking about, and your point, Director Liberty, and thinking about we know that our students, from looking at data over the past couple of years, our students who struggled with learning took a bigger hit. So our Hispanic kids took a bigger hit in their math scores. So these are things that we really think about in terms of how we're supporting our students and our teachers. So with K-5, we are really focusing in on illustrative mathematics with the focus on how all students can access it. So we've provided learning to all of our K-5 teachers throughout the year. It has been the focus of our professional learning with our teachers. We have provided menus of resources for principals where they can look at what their needs are in their building based on student data and be able to pick and choose from multiple different learning resources they could use with their staff. We have multiple learning cohorts of teachers that are engaging in learning about practices so that we can build that expertise in the building. We, again, are using the data protocol and student intervention teams at elementary, so that's really been the focus of learning for our K-5 teams, hand in hand with thinking about inclusion. For secondary, that's been a significant need as well. So we've had secondary math learning cohorts that are, again, focused on inclusive practices and equitable outcomes for all students that have been really popular and really well received. We are currently mid-implementation of equitable middle school math pathways. And through those math pathways, we are giving all students access to rigorous high-level learning. And through that, we are continuing to think about our engaging in learning and developing guidance on assessment. We're doing all the things that we talked about before with inclusionary practices and universal design for learning. So this is something that we recognize needs significant attention and are dedicating our resources to that.
I just have a clarifying question, though. Middle school math pathways, what exactly does it mean, equitable middle school math pathways?
So this is a project that we've done some updating over the past several years. What our typical, I'm sorry, I'm trying to pull out the right words. I think for many, many years, most of our students, 2/3 of our students accessed algebra by 8th grade, and 1/3 did not. The way that students accessed algebra before COVID was through an algebra placement test, through their Smarter Balance scores, through their grades. And in COVID, so the schools would typically say to students, we recommend this pathway for you if you're going to take algebra as a 7th grader, as an 8th grader, or if you're going to stay in 8th grade math. During COVID, we recognized that was something that we really needed to have more equitable practices and engage parents. So we gave parents more of an option to understand what our math looked like. What we realized was that we still had 2/3 of our students accessing algebra by 8th grade, and the students who were in 8th grade math, who did not access algebra until 9th grade, were very disproportionately our students in poverty, our students of color, and our students with IEPs. And so based on research and based on significant amounts of collaboration with our teachers, we have now put in place a redesigned 6th grade math, 7th grade math that now leads 6th grade math, 7th grade math, and algebra without having to jump pre-algebra, without having to take an assessment to get into it. We just have it set up as our pathway so that next year all 6th graders will take this course that we're currently calling 6+, and soon we'll just call it 6th grade math. We have the plus in there to indicate that something different is happening for our families and for our teachers. But all of our students in 5th grade this year will take 6th grade math. Quest will again be taking 6th grade math, and they'll be doing it's not exactly compressed. What we've done is eliminate redundancies in the math curriculum and work with our teachers around instructional practices that allow students to access the conceptual pieces and the fluency pieces so that they can move forward. It's actually a relatively typical pathway for many districts around us, and one that we're really excited to be moving forward in. But in terms of thinking about R2, what it does is give all of our students access to complex thinking and math with multiple access points and instructional practices that support their learning. So it's something that we think will make a difference to our R2 reports.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Director Stewart.
Could you quickly, I'm sorry to ask you this, but could you go to the list of the various areas, because this is 2.2, of the various topic areas?
Which one?
Back further.
Back further?
I'm looking from the reading and comprehension. There we go. Literacy and language. That's what I'm looking for. Do we have? I'm trying to figure out what kind of measurement we have for the lower verbal or nonverbal students, or those that are using AAC devices, because testing them is tough. And I don't know how we're being able to assess them. The more AAC they might use, the easier it might be to test, but not being able to test them doesn't allow them to grow. And so it's not a criticism, I'm just trying to figure out what we're doing to test them.
I can bring more information back about that. Wasn't something that I prepared for R2, but there are multiple ways that students are assessed when they're being served in special education. And typically with thinking about these measures here, we're focused on fast bridge and smarter balance. But with our students that you're talking about, we have multiple ways that we assess in terms of using technology, using assistive communication supports. It depends on the needs of the student.
Well, I understand
but
that.
we have a wide range of tools we can use for that.
I also had a student that didn't fit any of those categories, so that's why I'm asking.
That what?
Didn't fit any of the categories that the options, and
Okay.
the teacher kind of just after a couple of options said, "Eh."
And so all students are scheduled to take our standardized assessments, and then through the IEP process, then students would, I was just digging in here to make sure that they call it the WAAIM now, is the alternative assessment. And so there are some students that qualify to take the WAAIM as their standardized assessment. And it's based on the grade level standards. Like the teachers actually have to write the questions. It's quite an involved process to be able to develop a WAAIM, because it actually is in relation to the student, as opposed to just taking any universal accommodated assessment and handing it to a student. And so that's one of the ways. I know our schools, when it becomes testing season, the number of one-on-one testing protocols that we have in place, so students, having a one-on-one proctor for their exam. And so, I know our high schools on any given testing day, they're using every last corner of the school for students to be able to receive their accommodated assessment. And so we could follow up with additional information, but there's quite a bit of effort that goes into ensuring that the students, either 504 accommodations or the accommodations on their IEP, are aligned with either the Smarter Balanced or the WCAS, the science assessment, or the WAAIM, which I believe that's always a one-on-one assessment.
I asked the question too because it seems like the more involved student, or I'm not sure how well we're getting to the testing of them, the more involved ones. And I want to know if maybe this has evolved too over the last 5 years. If it has, I'm asking a historical question. But if it hasn't, I'd like to see us really try and work towards, with the AAC devices, we had virtually no staff that was trained on them at the time. And that made it difficult then to test them on them. So if there's an update of that, again, mine's more of a historical perspective, but thanks.
To just clarify real quickly, any student who did the assessment through AIM or through the alternative, they're included in this data as well, because there is a standard that they're meeting within that, correct?
So any student that receives accommodations for the SBA or WCAS, yes, they're included in this. We will follow up to make sure that, I want to make sure I'm answering your question accurately. I believe students that participate in the WAAIM are included in these data, but I will follow up to make sure.
Okay, thanks. Seeing no other questions, thank you for indulging us, Dr. Rose. Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm about to move on to science. Any additional questions on math? Okay. All right. So for science, again, this is one where when we're looking at WCAS, we saw a dip over COVID, and especially in the 11th grade where students are not required to take that for graduation. So we've been thinking more about how we are ensuring that our students meet state standards on WCAS. And when we look at that, when we look at benchmarking, it's positive in terms of how we compare to other districts. We definitely had some challenges at the elementary level, in some challenges and strengths in science over the past 2 years. So when we were remote learning, students had regular access to science lessons because those lessons were written and pushed out, but they were all asynchronous. And so that was something where they had daily, if they wanted it, access to science, but the instructional piece was unknown. So as we've come back into this year, and as we're thinking about achievement in science, again, when we're thinking about how our students are doing for local measures, when we're looking at our students getting full science credit with a grade of C or higher, we're seeing some really positive things in terms of growth. We absolutely see that we have additional areas to focus on. And so our responses have been thinking about, like at K-5, consistent implementation of Amplify K-5 Science. We started implementing Amplify in the 1920 school year and had professional learning and everything planned for that year. And so that got short-circuited a bit. And then, like I said, we had a different path for K-5 science while we were remote. So at this time, we're finally back into consistent implementation of our elementary science instructional resources. We are focusing on providing additional professional learning because we know our teachers need access to having learning refreshed. At the middle school level, as I shared on Saturday, we are piloting/implementing some really terrific open educational resources that are timely and relevant and dynamic. And we've been partnering in that implementation and learning with OSPI and with Puget Sound Educational Service District, and with collaboration with teachers across the state. That's been really exciting to think about most highly effective practices, high leverage practices around science. And again, with our science teachers, we've really been focused on continuing training on universal design for learning. And that second from the bottom bullet, engaging in learning and developing guidance on assessment, this has been really exciting in science, especially at the high school level. And I'll specifically call out some of the teachers at Lake Washington High School. But what I want to recognize about them is that our science teachers, and this is true in many other content areas, but it's been wonderful in science, provide professional learning for each other. And really specifically with science, it's been around supporting all students to high levels of learning and having the learning really be focused on standards. And with the Next Gen Science Standards, that's some pretty powerful learning. And that also has been focusing on expanding inclusionary practices at the school level. Any questions or thoughts on science?
It might be being saved to the end, so go ahead, keep going.
Okay. So for social studies, so you've actually heard much of the work that we're doing in social studies as it's coming up. Our students are, in the trend line, they're staying pretty static when we think about social studies. And when we look at the specifics of students earning 1.0 social studies by grade 10, that's a local number that overall has been going in a positive direction. And again, we think about our students, our Hispanic students, or our students, or different groups of students, where we want to make sure that the learning has multiple access points and that it's relevant and important for them. And so when we're looking at this by credit with a grade, or we're looking at civics, we're really excited to have our new resources coming into play. And again, that was actually one of the data pieces that we looked at early in the adoption, was the grades that our students received, and we broke it out by race, and used that as something that we looked at as a way to identify that we had some issues with our students of color, and our students in poverty were much more typically getting C's or D's or F's in some of their grades. And so that was something that we really thought about: what will be engaging, what will provide access, what will be something where students can see themselves in this implementation. So you heard, tonight we were able to formalize the secondary social studies adoption. We're starting a K-5 social studies adoption, and so we're in the learning year for that. And that's going to be a really powerful one as we think about the kinds of what you heard tonight about high school, about middle school, is something that we want to bring to that work as well, and thinking about how our students engage in social studies learning. We also have that same deep learning around high-quality instructional practices and development of resources. And in social studies, that's a content area that we have really been able to partner and provide resources along the way. And we're excited to have it be a much more holistic address on that. So that is what we're thinking about for social studies. Okay, all right. For computer science, information, and communication technology, this is an interesting one as far as how we're measuring it. That we're measuring it as students getting a grade of 3 or higher on information and communication technology. And so from that, you can see we have some really positive results as we are thinking about getting a grade of 3 or higher on information and communication technology. This is an area that we are excited to expand in how we're defining the work and how we're thinking about it. So thinking about the strand on the elementary report card is important, and we know that we really want to increase access to computer science for our students. And so that's something that we were able to pretty greatly expand as, I guess it was, if there's any silver lining, that one of the things that happened in COVID was just like our science lessons, we had every student, every teacher had access to computer science resources. And so as we came back last year, we really capitalized on that. So we've had our STEM specialists providing professional learning as a menu. So we've had asynchronous learning for teachers and being able to run sessions in our elementary schools. And a really exciting example of expanding computer science and coding was all of our preschool teachers were trained before school in using BlueBots. And so we were at Orsh with all of the preschool teachers, and it was a wonderful learning experience. And the teachers were really excited about it. So we're expanding that. And we've had, this year we had teachers in about 75% of our elementary schools participate in an hour of code. And our goal is, of course, that's for this coming year, for next year. It's not this year, but our goal is to continue to expand that because it's really exciting for our students. And we have a computer science advisory that is developing a CS implementation timeline. So with that, thinking about in a system that has so many different needs to it, how do we really recognize that computer science education really is part of our equity outcomes for students, and that it's highly engaging and provides ways for students of all abilities to be able to engage in collaborative learning. And for arts, we are again thinking about the indicator of our students in grade 10 earning 1.0 credit in grade 10 with a grade of C or higher. They have opportunities, so we have a pretty high percentage of our students doing that. They can continue to take art after that, so this is one where we're not twisting their arms, and this is still, like, they have time to be able to complete this before they graduate, but we're still seeing, for the most part, high levels of students achieving with this indicator. We again have some areas where we need to really think about why are some of these students not accessing art with meeting this indicator by grade 10 with this grade of C or higher, and how can we support that? So some of the ways that we've done that are thinking about how do we increase choice and how do we increase access and relevance for students. So schools, this work is primarily happening at schools, are developing and offering additional electives to increase student interest, increase student choice. We've got continued training on universal design for learning. Of all teachers, our art teachers have tremendous not amounts of time, but they are highly collaborative. And so that's something that really leads to their practice as well. And then again, some of our standard supports, especially thinking about secondary. At the elementary level, even though that's not part of our indicator, part of the training or professional learning over this past year for our music teachers, our K-5 music teachers and K-5 PE teachers has been around inclusive practices. So that's something that doesn't meet the indicator, but we're excited about anyway. Okay. And for world language, the indicators are really interesting. So the percent of students earning a 1.0 world language credit by grade 11 with a grade of C or higher, this is something where we're seeing some positive trends in this. And last year was our first year in implementing new science instructional resources. And I use that phrase very specifically because in Spanish and Japanese, the committee chose not to adopt a textbook, but to have it be something that was much more dynamic and something that was more student-based. And so we've had really positive student feedback from that. So that's been something that's been exciting. And we're just now implementing new French materials as well, and they went with more of a textbook. This one is interesting as a indicator because I'm so proud of how many students achieve the seal of biliteracy in Lake Washington School District. Percentage-wise, comparing to the percentage of graduates, it's one of the highest in the state. It's really exciting. We had a bump last year, and part of that, my hypothesis, is that we had so many students who were kind of storing up in 2020 because we couldn't offer this it was very challenging. We actually did find a way to offer this in-person test, but it was very challenging. So last year we had pent-up demand, which is why I think we had a bump in 2021. And then last year, again, kind of evened out a little bit. But it's exciting to see it's just exciting to see how many students get that. It's not so much something we can control, that students have that level of language to get a seal of biliteracy, but it's exciting that our students are able to access learning that way. For world language, it's, again, these don't directly apply to the indicator, but they're exciting as far as our academic achievement in general. We're offering heritage courses to our comprehensive high schools. We're continuing to develop and will always continue to develop new resources for Spanish and Japanese. We have new resources in French. We're expanding our dual language program in 2 ways. It's expanding to Redmond Middle School next year, and we have a steering committee, and part of the discussion of that steering committee is thinking about how do we expand access in elementary school as well. So that's something that, it's not this year, but it's something that we're looking at for the future. And again, all of those core practices that we're thinking about for inclusionary practices. So those are the major content areas. I wanted to really briefly highlight a couple pieces. So one is thinking about the use of digital tools. And Lexia was exciting this year because it was something we used during COVID, and it wasn't something that we'd used before. And really with our focus, and this came from our teachers and our building leaders, it wasn't something that we had planned on providing, but because we were so deeply looking at student needs, our teachers and our building leaders were very clear that we needed for our students a program like Lexia that could build those literacy skills. And so we were able to use some capital technology money, as well as some money from some different departments to be able to provide Lexia for all of our students again. And this really was our teachers saying we need additional tools to support our students' achievement in literacy. For math, we have Broombox for K-5 and Alex for 6 through 8 as one of our support tools. For summer school last year and again this year, we will intensify again, thinking about our structured reading classes for K-2 students and reading acceleration for 6 through 8, and focus on graduation requirement course credit recovery. And same thing with our current, through the year, we offer credit recovery options for our students. So these are, again, just the bullet points for the themes that I presented throughout this presentation. So we will continue to focus in on MTSS. We will continue our work around inclusionary practices with the specifics that I've listed, and we will continue our equity efforts as well.
Thank you. So, any additional questions for Dr. Rose? Evan?
So I'm sure that there is a explanation, but going back to the world language credit option, the students eligible for multilingual services scoring a 62%. Do we have an explanation on that, since their seal of biliteracy percentage is so high on the other hand?
Mm-hmm. I don't, but I can find that information for you.
Any other questions? Dr. Choi, Director Choi.
I guess it's just kind of a general curiosity. It's just a general curiosity. I'm looking at the data specifically from math and language. We see, in general, a negative trend for our assessment results across our grades, but then we see the inverse for students achieving a grade of C or higher, a positive trend. And I'm kind of curious why are we seeing kind of an inverse relationship between their grades in class versus their performance on these standards?
Mm-hmm. So part of what I can speak to on that is when we look at the trend lines for some of these things, or for thinking specifically about literacy and math, that we see some inconsistency. So we see some improvement overall for all student groups. When we look at our local practices, those are more reflective of, I think, of our local instructional practices. So when we see students that are achieving higher grades, so part of it is that, like, if we look at, I think it would be, it's a little difficult because, like, 10th grade literacy, we have all the issues that we talked about before. But when I think about grades, our teachers are providing multiple ways for our students to achieve. And that as we are thinking about inclusive practices and universal design for learning, unlike Smarter Balanced, we are asking students to demonstrate their learning in multiple different ways and giving them multiple shots at it. And so to me, it makes sense that when we are locally grading and recognizing our student learning, it would provide more of a holistic, likely much better picture than a Smarter Balanced assessment would.
Do you have any follow-up with that, Director Choi? You look like you were still thinking, so.
Yeah, so then if, I'm curious, so the grading practices has been something that's not officially changed in any regard, correct? Like it's not like we have decided we're going to change our grading practices as of this point in time. And therefore, I guess I wouldn't necessarily think that you would see an overall trend change across all of, this is our entire student population that's 10th grade, and right? So yes and no. It's a conundrum. Like I'm not quite sure.
So you might see. So we haven't grading practices is something that what we've actually really focused on is assessment practices, and within the focus of universal design for learning and inclusive practices. So as much as there isn't anything that says this is how a teacher must grade, we've been dedicating our professional learning for 2+ years on increasing teachers' ability to teach flexibly so that all students can succeed. Starting from way back, but really I'm even thinking about in August of 2020 when we focused in on John Hattie's research, and he was actually even our keynote speaker for our teachers, focusing in on what are high leverage instructional practices. So that has been a focus for 3 years, that while we haven't mandated grading, we have really focused in on instructional strategies. I can't draw a causal piece to that, but that's what makes sense to me about why our local grades might look different than Smarter Balanced.
So then if the local grades are more reflective of an equitable or almost a more mastery-based learning concept then, correct? Does that mean that we are discovering a flaw in our ability to assess mastery?
I would say that it's a continued consideration, and I would also say I am a strong believer in finding pieces of data and unpacking them. Like I think it's really important for us to look at these numbers and not excuse ourselves from understanding who is behind them and how we address them. I think it's really important. And I think that other way of how we're assessing and how we're recognizing student learning is also really important.
Thank you.
I think there's something very different between a teacher's ongoing engagement with a student. Our teachers tell us they're exhausted and tired because their commitment and work and, ongoing efforts with students that are struggling, aren't getting a concept. They may, our secondary teachers have office hours, so they're, so you think of all of the work that goes into trying to develop the concept in the moment, and it's really kind of this overall effort that goes into it versus SBA where it's, it's a one point in time snapshot that carries with it all sorts of test anxiety, didn't have breakfast, those factors play into it as well. Whereas a teacher is dealing with those factors over time as opposed to just that one moment. So while they're both attempting to measure the same thing, I think the measures are different.
So if I may, from just a historical perspective, we added in looking at actual grades and Ps probably within the last 4 years, I believe, partially because recognizing that that was a different data point and provided different information. At first, we actually didn't even use a grade. It was, did you pass? And then it was like, but if you're passing with a D, we're not convinced necessarily that so let's up that a little bit and see where we go, sort of recognizing these differences of the information that it can provide in relation to a one-time test versus the ongoing sort of class and grade. Ideally, to give us a better idea of what reasonable progress might be happening where we might not get as much through the Smarter Balanced assessment. So it's trying to round that out, just from a historical piece. You were about to say something, Director Choi. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I appreciate the nuances between grading a course versus a one-day test. But I guess what's interesting to me is the trend, right? Because we're looking at that one-day test year over year over year. We're not just saying last year with the changes in grading practices and the one test. So therefore, I was just curious. Thank you.
Director LaLiberty.
A question maybe for the board. I was looking at, I don't know why I'm so locked in on this refusal thing today, but there you are. I was looking in the report, it's reported out that 60% of 11th graders did not take the science SBA assessment. And looking at our historical data for for SBA for science, I suspect that has been pretty constant over the last 4 years. So a question for the board is, okay, if 60% of our students are not participating in the examination, is this an actually meaningful data in terms of evaluating the system?
Probably not.
Another rhetorical question, because the answer is probably not. So I wonder if this is something we want to continue having in the report. Recognizing that this is, an important metric that gets reported to, well, not important. This is a metric that gets reported to OSPI. But there's data gets reported to OSPI, and there's data that we as a board use to evaluate the system. I don't know that this fits that latter criteria. Dr. Holman, did I trigger anything that?
I don't know if we're at the conclusion and policy recommendations portion of the broadcast. Okay, we're there. So I actually talked with both President Bleasner and Vice President Choi this last week about R2 in relation to OE11. And as we think about the board evaluating the system through the results, the academic results lens, I'm not sure everything that was presented tonight really helps the board evaluate the system in terms of academics. And so my ask was that at the March study session, we actually take R2 and OE11, because it isn't that any aspect that we talk about isn't important, because many of these pieces are why kids come to school. And so having, very clear parameters and expectations within OE11, I think is totally appropriate, so that the board has that ongoing dialogue about it. And are these really the things that legitimately help the board evaluate the system? I believe we may be able to find some other pieces of data that are a little bit more targeted and focused. So that was my request, and it was an approved request by your colleagues, and so that conversation will be occurring at the March study session.
I'm very pleased to hear that we're all in alignment on the uselessness of some of this.
But in regards to sort of conclusions, though, in those pieces, I do think the world language one is one to highlight in regards to these results. I think the work that has gone in there, the expansion of dual language learning, and now the thought of moving into elementary, this is where I think the focusing on results that we did has helped to sort of shape that going forward. So I appreciate the extra efforts that have come in. Having toured or visited the Heritage class at Eastlake High School, there's a lot of strength in doing heritage language at addressing some of the equity challenges as well, and providing opportunities to asset-base the approach. So I really do think the world language, recognizing the diversity of our communities, I do think that's a key one as we look at R2. I do think, and you've mentioned that as we went through the challenges, if you look at just a year one, like if you go last year to this year, you do see flat or increasing, but we're not back to where we were initially. And I think if we had seen the trend lines for the different subgroups, low income and different, you might not see as much an increase. You might actually see an increased gap. I think that's the challenge I have with the way it's presented, is I'm missing what is that difference, and is it bigger now for our different groups? Is it less? Because the goal is to accelerate learning in those places with the pieces. So I think that's a question that I have hanging over my head as I looked at this information. I think the computer science and the work in that area, it's clear. It's clear through our school visits that we see lots of technology getting utilized in many ways. And our kinders are quite as nimble with it and can problem solve for you as our seniors are. So it's great to see that integration that has occurred across the board and being able to do so. Math, again, being fundamental, I think those are the ones we highlight into our elementary, and to make sure that that should be a target as how we move forward, I think, in thinking about some of the areas to really hit. Appreciate the middle school math and the comment. That was sort of my question. I know algebra had been a question, as that's viewed as a foundational entrance math. So being able to get that more often and getting strength in students in that area is great. Yes, I was doing conclusions. Was that good?
Yeah, can I ask a follow-up on something you just said?
Sure.
So we've talked, I think, each year we've monitored R2, we've talked about, or at least one board member, usually it's you or Chris, has talked about what you or Chris view to be the important metrics within this. And I think you just referred to middle school math as being one. So a question for the board, and maybe is, should we as a board identify, we monitor all this, should we identify 3-4 priorities within this as something as the areas of focus? I think maybe if we are to do that, I as a board member would need a little bit of learning on that. I hear you say that middle school algebra is a very important metric for student success. I have no reason to doubt you, but I'm not familiar with the literature on that as much. So it's something that I think if we were to do that as a board, it's something I would need to spend a little bit of time and have a little bit of learning on as well. So it's an interest of mine.
No, that's great. And I think that's the idea of what would happen at the extended retreat, is to be able to do that as we look through and have those conversations. If there's additional information, we can start to build that into. Excellent.
I think sorry, Director Blazer, you've also, I don't know if you said it tonight, but you've also referred to before second grade, I think first, second grade literacy. Am I saying that correct? As
K3.
K3.
Multiple primary literacy.
As a really important focus too. And that's another one where, again, I suspect that's the literature bears, the academic research bears that out too, but I'd like to read it.
Go.
Okay. I wanted to, one thing Director Blusner mentioned that I also wanted to flag as a good sign is when you look at our data, the 4-year historical trend, 2019, quite a precipitous drop to 2021 when we measure again. For almost all of our metrics, though, we are on the climb back up, and I think that is worth noting as a positive. It is not remaining flat for almost every single metric. We are on the way back up, and I think that's we're not back where we want to be, but I know that a lot of work, and it's something worth. It's hard to celebrate things when we're not where we want to be, but I do think it is worth celebrating that the district is, or at least worth pointing out as a good sign that we are on track to getting back to where we were and then moving past it. So.
Any other conclusions, comments? Director Liberty, go ahead. Okay. Director Choi or Director Stewart? Evan? Okay. Nope, you're up.
Another thing, again, we're not where we want to be. But if we look at our benchmark, and that's why I think it's great that we do this, where we look at our benchmark data versus our comparison districts, which are in Appendix C to the report. We're, in terms of the large comparison districts, we're number 1 essentially in every category. And if you include Mercer Island, a smaller comparison district, we end up basically being two or three in every category. So again, we're not where we want to be. No public school district is right now, but I do think that's, it leads me to be less concerned about the data, I guess, or feeling more hopeful about our data is how I'd frame it.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, then this will come back at our March 6th. March 6th, am I correct? Yes. Our March 6th meeting. we'll bring back just a summary of the discussion, then we can do the actual votes. If you have additional questions or things, I would ask if it's possible to get the trend lines for the different subgroups before that meeting. Would that be possible, Dr. Holman? Okay. Same ones they had before,
For your
yes.
trend lines for the subgroups. Yeah.
Yeah, it would just be helpful to be able to see. And I think that's it. So with that, we will wrap up that discussion for tonight and expect to see it on the March 6th. So thank you for the conversation. Thank you so much for the presentation. I appreciate your walking through all of that. Our next item on the agenda is our superintendent report. Dr. Holman.
Only the cool kids got their faces painted at Old Redmond Schoolhouse. And so, one of the unique challenges about my new format for the superintendent's report is there are so many good things going on across our district. This literally could be our 3-hour meeting, is just talking about the great things. So I have a number of things to highlight tonight, and so I will briefly talk about a number of them, but so many good things going on that I want to share. First is the ribbon cutting ceremony that we held at Old Redmond Schoolhouse. As the board knows, we opened the Early Learning Center 2-3 years ago. Weren't able to invite community in to celebrate that with us. We were able to do that last week, and so here's just some pictures of the updated exterior and interior of the Old Redmond Schoolhouse. And both President Bleasner and Vice President Troy were able to join us at the ceremony and had a number of different individuals speak. It was actually interesting to hear Executive Director Buck just kind of talk about the process that went into this, and he kind of talked about getting into the old bones of a 100-year-old building and caused us to delay a year, and that delay actually served us well, because we were able to do some updates on the exterior of the building that we otherwise wouldn't have had time to do, or we may not have thought through. The partnership with the city of Redmond to accomplish this project, we had to work through a number of processes. We put an ADA ramp on the front of the building, and to do that on a historical site takes a partnership, and there is a process to be able to do that, because you don't want to jeopardize the historical aspect of the building. And so we had a ceremony, lasted about 45 minutes, and then the school staff at Old Redmond Schoolhouse actually held a school walkthrough, invited parents and students, and you can see a young lady getting her face painted there. I sat and got my face painted. I was asked, what do you want? Do you want a heart, a butterfly, a spider? And I paused for a second, and I got a heart. And so, anyways, it was just so much fun to celebrate that with our community, our staff. It was exciting. Want to recognize one of our staff members, Jared Kelly. He is a director in human resources. He's also an attorney by trade. He served in active duty in the Air Force I'm sure there's a JAG, I think that might be the correct term. And he's a reservist in the United States Air Force. He was just promoted to lieutenant colonel. And so this is pictures of him going through that ceremony. And Jared also reflects on this. Having his family participate in this with him was very tremendous. And so it's not every day that we have a lieutenant colonel serving in our midst. And so I thought I would bring that to you. As a reservist, he dedicates a weekend a month, and he actually just completed a 2-week reservist duty out of state. And so as a school district, we get to support that and really do value him participating in the reserves and what that brings for him. want to recognize that Lake Washington School District just was awarded for the 6th year in a row the Meritorious Budget Award. And really what that Meritorious Budget Award recognizes is an outside agency looking at our processes, procedures, and our public presentation and write-up about our budget, and states that it meets the highest of standards. And so just want to recognize our internal team that goes through that process. We're the only district in the state of Washington that has been awarded the Meritorious Budget Award, and so it's an ongoing commitment that we have to align with high best practices. Our students are absolutely busy, and so there's almost too much here to share with you, but just in the last couple of weeks, and actually going on right now, we have over 366 students participating in postseason activities. Here on the right is the Eastlake cheer team. They won first in 4A tumbling large. Please don't ask me what tumbling large is because I wouldn't be able to describe it, but Eastlake Cheer also participated, got 5th place in 4A game day large, and then Juanita High School Cheer got 2nd place in 3A game day medium. And so shout out to our cheer teams. And then you can see here listed, we have so many teams participating in postseason, either district or state meets and things like that. You also see the last one on the list, and I don't remember what WMEA stands for. It's the Washington Music Educators Association. It's the state competition, and so you can see we have teams from all of our schools participating in that event as well. And so just a lot to be proud of, and really congratulations. We did a site visit at Tesla STEM the other day, and one of our student tour guides had to run off because he was headed to his district swim meet. And so congratulations to all of our students that are participating and doing well in competition, but also well in the classroom. Cambridge is a program that we have at Juanita High School, and so we just received a letter letting us know how our students are performing. We have 35 of our students that received Scholar Awards, and so there's a number of different levels, and at each level you need to attain a certain level of, if you will, competency or successes. And so 5 distinction levels, 8 merit levels, and 22 scholar levels. And it was indicated that these are some of the rarest outcomes in our country. Cambridge is a international, and so it was commented to us by the Cambridge folks that these are really, really high results, and so that's very exciting. Want to celebrate academic success. The young man you see here, his name is Tristan, reached out, the team at Rose Hill Elementary reached out to his family. I got an email with some information about this young man. I wanted to share the success of this, and so reached out to his family, and they were happy for us to share Tristan's story. And so Tristan is a young man who is now learning at Rose Hill Elementary in his neighborhood school. And this day, the team was celebrating that he participated in his general education classroom for 100% of his day. And it wasn't that Tristan was just there. He was learning. He was engaging with peers. You can see to his left, that's a communication device that he uses to engage with his classroom, his peers in his classroom. You can see here's some additional pictures of him just learning along with his peers. Want to recognize Sue Young Lim, his 3rd grade teacher, and Ben Thompson, one of his other teachers that support him through his day. And it's just such a celebration to see our learners participating in their neighborhood schools with their peers. And you can see by the smile on Tristan's face, he is having a great time. And so this is a quote that, and it's a little blurry, but our executive director of special services sent to me the other day, just that inclusion is a mindset. It is a way of thinking. It is not a program that we run or a classroom in our school or a favor we do for someone. Inclusion is who we are. It is who we must strive to be. And so just wanted to celebrate the team at Rose Hill Elementary. Our schools in the Kirkland region are all working hard around their inclusionary practices, and celebrating some successes is an important aspect of that as well. Some calendar items coming up. At our last board meeting, the board recognized this as the start of National School Counseling Week. So want to give a shout out to our school counselors for everything they do for our students. On our calendar, VEX robotics tournaments. We have a couple of those coming up at Timberline Middle School. And on the calendar, they're scheduled from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. And so, wow. What a day for our participants and those supporting it. We have midwinter break coming up along with President's Day. Kindergarten registration. With the implementation of full-time kindergarten for all students, the whole concept of kindergarten registration has reduced a bit for community, but we know getting students registered as early as possible helps us to be able to staff our classrooms appropriately. And so our schools are doing a number of different efforts, including just outreach, come register for kindergarten in person, school tours, and Blackwell Elementary has an event on the calendar called Kindergartner Belonging Event. It's just the idea of inviting families and kindergartners in. And then religious holiday coming up, Ash Wednesday. Ash Wednesday is the start of Lent for individuals that practice Christianity. And it's interesting to look through our calendar to see all of the different religious holidays and events that take place that are recognized throughout our community. And so I'll bring those to this space as well. So that's my superintendent's report and celebrations of student, staff, and community.
All right, thank you. So our next item on the agenda is Public and Community Affairs. So Director Stewart?
Yes, this last weekend, basically the 28th through the 1st, I attended the National School Directors Association lobbying, if you will, meeting in D.C. All the members of the WASDA from around the state basically made appointments with their representatives as well as the senators. We also had a delegation, two delegations, one going to the Department of Agriculture to talk about school lunches, and another one going to Department of Education to talk about special ed. I in particular, because of where we are, in addition to meeting with Senator Cantwell, met with Representative Schreier and Representative Del Bene, primarily her staff for Representative Del Bene, but for the one time in my life I was actually early, so I actually ran into her and had a chance to talk to her. It was very helpful. We've got some very good fans in education here, and one of the things we asked them is, how can we help you help us? What do we need to do to take this to a higher level? And they were very responsive to that, and it was interesting that one of the things that I've always said that you accomplish, whether in public affairs or whatever, is you find one piece of common ground with people, with staff, and with Representative Del Bene's staff, we found that the woman that is in charge of her education area had a brother who had special needs, and she indeed had a 504 for dyslexia. And so her passion burns with us. And it's one of those things that you just can't live without those little pieces of commonality.
Great, thank you. Any other updates on Public and Community Affairs? If not, Barbara, yes. Our Associate Superintendent Posthumous.
Just a quick update on kind of what we've been doing with the legislative session. Both in the House and the Senate Education Committees are moving quickly and passing bills before the upcoming February 17th policy committee cut off in the last 2 weeks. In the last 2 weeks, they've approved a total of 31 bills. So we have testified on 10 bills with a combination of virtual and written testimony. Our testimony is focused on explaining the bill's potential fiscal impacts and on the district encouraging the legislature to provide appropriate funding for new and existing programs. 3 of the 5 special education funding bills we have been tracking were referred to fiscal committees with new hearings scheduled for this week. We're tracking over 30 bills of interest. Staff met with, I met with Representative Wallen at her request to review special education and COVID relief funding. And then Dr. Holman and I also met with Congresswoman Delbenny's legislative and district staff to discuss priorities around special education funding and transition to an electric bus fleet. This week, we're scheduled to testify on 7 bills in the areas of special education, graduation requirements, sustainable transportation, and prejudgment interest. And that's my update for the week, or the last 2 weeks.
Thank you. That was great. All right, having nothing else to share with that, our next item is board member and student board rep comments. Okay, Director Stewart.
I was very interested to see the various sports and activities that we've made to state and to high levels, if you will. I think it behooves us to take a look at the fact how far our cheer teams have gone, and the fact that maybe we need to relook the idea of having cheer be considered a sport. I can't think of too many more things that are as athletic in those regards in different ways that require dedication the same as you would for baseball, football, whatever. And I think it's time that maybe we start to take a look at that. And whatever procedures we need to go through and processes, I'd really love to see us, I'd like to find out what the process is so we can get the ball rolling, because those students really deserve it. I'd also like to add my congratulations to Tristan and his teachers and his peers too, because I'll tell you, with special needs, it's a matter of how well the peers then take you under their wing. And because all of a sudden you're one of their buddies, you're one of their friends, and without the peers, to be quite frank, inclusion can't work. The teachers have to make it work, but also the peers really, because all of a sudden they're sitting next to a typical developing peer, and the eyes light up. I saw his device and I recognized it immediately, and I think it's great. So congratulations, Tristan.
Director Choi.
Over the last couple of weeks, I've been very fortunate to be able to go on 4 different school visits, our January visits and our February visits, to Lake Washington High School, Kirkland Middle School, Muir Elementary, and to Tesla STEM High School. And it's really been, well, first I just want to say thank you to all the staff and the teachers and the principals that made these visits happen. They've been really eye-opening. We talk when we're doing our monitoring reports and looking at results. You know, we talk at a high level about student achievement overall, and it's getting to actually get into these schools and see kind of the different challenges that each community faces. They're so different from each other, and they have such amazing teams working through whatever issues or challenges that they might have together, and still putting kids first and achieving these very high goals that we set for them. It's been really great to see, and I've learned so much. Literally, you couldn't have more different environments from school to school, and I think that that's really been enlightening. So I would encourage as many board members who can to attend future school visits, because it's been great.
I'd just like to echo that, having had the opportunity to also go on those school visits. And again, thank you to staff. We feel very welcomed and appreciate their willingness to spend a lot of time and sort of explaining things to us and showing the highlights of what's going on. At Lake Washington High School, some of the work in CTE was what we got highlighted there. If you get the chance, they do a student broadcast of their Kang News every Wednesday for 10 to 15 minutes, and it's a run from a broadcast journalism. They bring in a lot of professional mentors to able to support. It's a pretty impressive sort of run, and that was true in their culinary program as well. So you really started to see all the problem-based learning, the community partnership, the opportunity to explore. They bring in the National Association's Future Farmers of America, worked in the urban agricultural program, and they connected into that. So absolutely fabulous. We can speak. Kirkland Middle School is doing some incredible work, and Tesla STEM, we had great opportunity to learn about the different paint chips and forensics and what you can do in regards to crime scenes, and they are developing new techniques in which to address those things. So footprints and depth, some pretty amazing projects going on. And I would agree that the differences that you see between each of our schools, our elementaries all have their strengths going through, and Mira is doing some amazing work in their area with inclusion and different components throughout and instruction. We had the opportunity to go to a kindergarten class where there were 2 students in there who the comment was they would not have been at their neighborhood school or would have been in the resource center, and now they are in the classroom with their peers, and it was a fabulous opportunity to see the strength of that partnership going on with staff. So again, thank you for organizing those, and highly encourage getting a chance to get out there. Any other comments?
I'll be quick. Firstly, my thunder was a little bit stolen on the athletics. It's all right. Just to contextualize 2 of those points, Juanita High School went to state, won second. It was their first time going in 8 years, and they had a first-year coach. So a tremendous shout-out to Coach Tiara for making that run happen. Lake Washington High School, as much as it pains me to say it as a Juanita Raven, not only are they in the postseason, they are listed as the 3rd best team in the state and the best 3A team in the states, which is incredible. And then lastly, while it's the start of Black History Month, obviously a lot of our high schools and middle schools are making tremendous strides to recognize that in appropriate ways. I'm going to save most of that to our next meeting because a lot of it hasn't happened yet, but I have already been seeing some excellent strides in that direction, and I know some of the upcoming stuff will be even better.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, so our next board meeting is scheduled for March 6th, study session at 5, with the board meeting following at 7. And that would be it. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the February 6th, 2023 board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Director La Liberty and seconded by Director Choi to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.